Chapter 141, Firebolt and Meteor Shoes. The vest was temporarily out of commission, and John had taken to using different handwriting styles for each of his aliases, Johnny Silverhand and John Wick. This was a precaution to prevent anyone from connecting the two identities. While John Wick's connections might have been able to navigate the complexities of the Ministry of Magic for a matter as trivial as a hippogriff's trial, Dharma Alex's pride wouldn't allow it. Tangmi, the captain of the security for Johnny Silverhand's store, was competent, but even he needed the backing of someone influential to sway the ministry. Forget it, there's still time. No need to worry, John reassured himself. Buckbeak's trial wasn't until April 4th, giving them a few months to prepare. Leaving Hagrid's cabin, where the half-giant's sobs were too loud for comfort, John stepped into the snow outside. There, he found 3 figures, one large and 2 smaller ones, half buried in a snowdrift, only their backsides visible. Yaya was the first to emerge, pulling out the other 2 like carrots from the ground. John couldn't help but wonder what game had led them to bury their heads in the snow. After dusting off the snow from his coat, John looked up at the sky, a sense of resignation in his voice. It seems the Animagus transformation won't be completed within these 2 months. The following day, the trio was back to their diligent selves, scouring the library for defense materials with the same fervor they had when searching for Nicholas Flamel in their first year. John, meanwhile, had acquired 2 unicorn horns from Hagrid, who had them in stock and was in no mood to venture into the Forbidden Forest. John had considered seeking unicorns himself, but knowing their sensitivity and purity, only allowing pure-hearted virgins to approach them, he decided against it. Unicorns could detect malice, making their horns and the wands crafted from their hair particularly resistant to dark magic. Back in his workspace, John ground the unicorn horn into powder and added it to his cauldron. The potion transitioned from a bubbling green to a serene milky white. After taking a sip, his expression remained unchanged, his focus shifting to a pair of shoes on the table. These were his flying shoes, now awkwardly large due to his growth. Intent on upgrading them, he discarded the original pair in favor of the new meteor shoes, designed for enhanced speed, agility, and durability. Slipping on the oversized shoes, John tapped the heels together, and they magically adjusted to fit snugly against his skin, their material soft yet resilient. He was confident that ordinary spells couldn't damage them. He had also inscribed runes representing Ewaz, the rune of transportation, ensuring smooth travel over any terrain. With a snap of his fingers, the room of requirement transformed, revealing a racetrack. John tested the shoes, feeling the rush as the meteor pattern on their surface lit up with each step, signaling he had reached maximum speed. It was like flying, surpassing the speed of most broomsticks on the market. He wondered how they compared to the legendary Firebolt. After a test flight, where small wings appeared on the shoes for added lift, John landed, the wings vanishing as he snapped his fingers once more. The racetrack dissolved, revealing the Chamber of Secrets of Gryffindor. Now a descendant of Gryffindor, John had access to secrets and powers beyond his wildest dreams, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with his new meteor shoes and the legacy of his house. John had mastered the magic of altering the Room of Requirement. Although he didn't possess the Gryffindor sword, the Room of Requirement was more than enough to fulfill his needs. It could be argued that the Room of Requirement was the most extraordinary magic within Hogwarts, a testament to the ingenuity of the school's founders. Christmas brought an avalanche of presents for Tom Riddle, nearly burying him under their weight. John Wick's pile of gifts was substantial, and Johnny Silverhand's was expected to be even larger. Among the gifts John received were many from his fellow Slytherin students, as well as from his uncle. His parents had sent presents too. Watson Wake gifted a chirping toy bird, while Mrs. Wake presented a finely crafted pocket watch. John's father had included a lengthy letter, which, beyond daily pleasantries, primarily requested John to craft him a magic wand, core or not. John couldn't help but smirk at his father's directness. The gifts from his uncle were part of a larger family tradition. With John's grandfather and Mrs. Wick included, the family boasted 12 children. This time, all 9 of John's uncles and both aunts had sent gifts, a change from the previous occasion when only the eldest uncle had done so. The gifts were varied, ranging from nesting dolls to daggers and knuckles, tame in comparison to firearms. Uncle Andre, who had taken John hunting, sent a large box of meat, which, thanks to the cold weather, didn't pose any risk of spoiling. The aunt's gifts were less martial, consisting of gloves and scarves. After trying these on, John proceeded to open the rest of his presents. The Slytherin students had mostly sent candies and small gifts. Malfoy had sent exquisite snacks, which coincidentally were similar to those sent by Daphne. Heinrich had gifted a book on dark magic, which John discreetly set aside. It seemed that word had gotten out about John's fondness for food, resulting in an abundance of edible gifts. While John would have been thrilled with such presents the previous year, they now seemed somewhat mundane. At noon, John noticed Harry, Ron, and Hermione dining together, with the latter appearing to be left out. It was clear there had been a disagreement. With the school's population reduced for the holidays, Dumbledore had suggested a communal meal. Alongside Dumbledore, McGonagall, several other professors, and Filch, there were a few students totaling 12 people. John kept his distance, wary of Dumbledore's potential to detect his soul injury. Dumbledore, noting John's absence, inquired about it. Filch, donning a new tuxedo instead of his usual brown coat, proudly announced it was a Christmas gift from John. Dumbledore's interest was piqued, given Filch's usual unpopularity. When asked about John's whereabouts, a fifth-year Slytherin mentioned he had left with Edgar to attend to some matters. The conversation shifted when Trelawney brought up a superstition about a curse involving 13 diners, where the first to rise would supposedly meet an untimely end. Her warning, however, was largely dismissed. After the meal, Harry was eager to return to the common room, having received a firebolt. He and Ron were ecstatic, paying no heed to Hermione's concerns about the broom's mysterious origins. Their excitement was solely focused on the firebolt, even as Ron harshly rebuked Hermione when Crookshanks once again went after Scabbers. Harry sensed Ron's moodiness, but chose not to comment, his attention firmly on the new broom. In his heart, Harry felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as he returned to the Gryffindor common room. Together with Ron, he admired the firebolt from various angles, their eyes gleaming with awe. Suddenly, the doorway opened and Hermione entered, followed closely by Professor McGonagall. "Miss Granger has informed me that you've received a broomstick, Mr. Potter," Professor McGonagall stated, her sharp eyes immediately locking onto the firebolt. Harry felt an urge to hide the broom, but it was too late. Professor McGonagall was already approaching, and there was no escape. Upon questioning, it became clear that the broom was a gift with no accompanying note, no identified sender, and an unknown origin. Professor McGonagall expressed her intention to temporarily confiscate the broom for inspection. Harry, his voice trembling, tried to assure her, "It's fine, really, Professor." "You can't be certain, Potter," Professor McGonagall replied. Her tone was kind, yet tinged with a hint of helplessness. With Sirius Black on, the loose, and at such a sensitive time, Harry's desire to ride a firebolt of unknown provenance was concerning, regardless of its quality. "I will keep you informed of any developments," she assured him, explaining that the broom would need to be disassembled and inspected by a professional. Harry could only watch in dismay as she took the firebolt away. Ron, unable to contain his frustration, turned his anger towards Hermione. "What were you thinking, going to Professor McGonagall?" he demanded, his voice raised in anger. Hermione, feeling both wronged and embarrassed, her cheeks flushed with a mix of shame and indignation, defended herself. "I did it because I believe, and Professor McGonagall agrees, that the broom might have been sent to Harry by Sirius Black," she exclaimed, her intention pure but the outcome unfortunate. Even Harry couldn't suppress his irritation at Hermione's actions. Feeling deeply aggrieved, Hermione turned and walked out of the common room, leaving behind a tense atmosphere. Her actions were meant for the benefit of her friends, yet they had only served to create a rift between them. Chapter 142, The Firebolt Dilemma. Hermione Granger, known for her intelligence, understood the gravity of the situation she found herself in. After confiding in Professor McGonagall, she felt the sting of being misunderstood, which led to a fallout with her friends. Seeking solace, She initially headed towards the library, but was soon distracted by the sight of Crookshanks, her pet cat, playfully chasing after a fellow creature. The sight of their carefree frolic stirred a sense of envy in Hermione, prompting her to abandon her original plan and follow them instead. Her pursuit led her to the Quidditch pitch, a place that, during the Christmas season, was unusually deserted. There, she stumbled upon John, a fellow student not known for his involvement in Quidditch, who appeared deeply engrossed in examining a mysteriously wrapped gift box. Curiosity piqued, Hermione approached him, asking, "John, what brings you here?" John, caught off guard by her presence, saw an opportunity. With a wave and a smile, he invited her to join him, saying, "Hermione, your timing couldn't be better. Help me try this out." Without waiting for her response, he eagerly unwrapped the package, revealing a brand-new firebolt broomstick. Hermione was momentarily taken aback, recognizing the broomstick as identical to the one Harry had received earlier that day. The craftsmanship of the firebolt, from its gleaming handle adorned with a gold registration number to its streamlined tail made of birch twigs, was nothing short of artistry. "Firebolt? Where did you get this?" Hermione inquired, her concern evident. She feared that, like Harry, John might not know the identity of the sender. John, surprised by her question, responded with a hint of confusion. "I bought it myself. Who else would give it to me?" He couldn't hide the slight grimace at the mention of the purchase. The firebolt's hefty price tag of 5,000 galleons was a painful reminder of its extravagance. Despite his family's wealth and successful business ventures, John's personal expenses, including maintaining social connections, alchemy, book purchases, and salaries, meant that his disposable income was limited. He explained that he had ordered the firebolt before Christmas, partly as a whimsical purchase and partly to test the speed of some experimental shoes. To John, owning a firebolt was akin to a muggle owning a sports car, a luxury item with significant collection value, something to be admired even if not frequently used. However, John faced a dilemma. An injury to his right hand made controlling the firebolt a challenge, and the risk of falling was not one he was willing to take lightly. With a look of genuine distress, he handed the broomstick to Hermione, asking her to test its speed on his behalf. Hermione was taken aback by John's casual display of wealth. The firebolt's reputation as the fastest broomstick in existence was well known, and its price was beyond the reach of many, including Harry, who could only dream of owning one. The fact that John, who came from a muggle family, could afford such a luxury was bewildering to her. John mistook Hermione's hesitation for fear of flying the high-speed broomstick. He reassured her, emphasizing the firebolt's unparalleled speed and handling capabilities. Despite her reservations, Hermione couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and curiosity at the prospect of flying such an esteemed broomstick. Ordinary people indeed struggle to control it. "Looking for Heinrich? I don't recall seeing him on a broomstick," John said, furrowing his brow in thought. He considered his options, either find Harry himself or bring Malfoy back. "If you're flying around, I can do it too," Hermione interjected, looking at John with a hint of nervousness. "Which hand did you injure?" she asked. John raised his right hand, which trembled uncontrollably. "I had a bit of an accident while practicing magic. It'll take some time to heal, but it's nothing serious," he explained, trying to downplay the severity of his injury. Despite his reassurance, Hermione couldn't help but worry. Eventually, John convinced her that he would recover in no more than 2 months, which brought her some relief. Mounting the firebolt with a certain awkwardness, Hermione felt tense. Her nervousness was palpable, especially when compared to Harry's proficiency in flying. If John hadn't been there, she might have backed out. A whimsical thought crossed her mind. How envious Harry and Ron would be if they saw her mastering the firebolt. With a deep breath and a determined kick, Hermione launched herself forward. The firebolt shot out like an arrow from a bow. "What?" Hermione screamed, the world blurring past her at an alarming speed. A doorframe loomed ahead, and in a panic, she yanked hard, sending the firebolt soaring upwards. Realizing she was losing control, John leapt into action, propelling himself forward with a gust of wind beneath his feet. Wings sprouted from his shoes, aiding his pursuit. As he chased after Hermione, John calculated their speed. marveling at the firebolt's capabilities as the fastest broom in the world. His shoe wings expanded, flapping vigorously as he accelerated, closing the distance between them. Spotting a ball frame in Hermione's path, John didn't hesitate to cast a shattering spell, obliterating it just in time to prevent a disastrous collision. The debris smeared across Hermione's face, a far better outcome than the potential danger she faced. "Accelerate," John urged himself, the patterns on his shoes lighting up as he surged forward, leaving a trail of clouds in his wake. He reached out, grabbing Hermione by the back of her collar, and shouted, "Let go!" Hermione, clinging to the firebolt like a lifeline, finally heard John's command. Trusting him implicitly, she released her grip, and John caught her, holding her close as the firebolt veered off course and began to descend. John raised his trembling right hand, channeling his magic to safely retrieve the falling firebolt, which landed softly on the ground. The wings on his shoes fluttered weakly as they descended, and upon touching the ground, Hermione stood, albeit unsteadily, and apologized. "I'm sorry, John, I thought." "It's fine," John reassured her, wiping away his sweat. He resolved never to let Hermione use the firebolt again. It was too dangerous. However, the experience had proven the meteor shoe's capability to match the firebolt's speed, even revealing a super acceleration mode that John was hesitant to use due to its high energy consumption. Following the ordeal, Hermione's spirits lifted significantly. She suddenly yelled out in realization, causing John to wince and cover his ears, puzzled by her outburst. Initially, Hermione rushed towards the location where the firebolt had fallen, her heart heavy with concern. Harry and Ron had already expressed their frustration when Professor McGonagall took the firebolt for inspection. Hermione couldn't even begin to fathom the extent of their anger if the firebolt had been damaged. Upon reaching the firebolt, she found it lying there, unscathed and as pristine as if it were brand new. As her panic subsided, Hermione realized something was amiss. How had John managed to fly beside her, and more puzzlingly, why was the firebolt in perfect condition? She turned her attention to John, who was amusingly holding Crookshanks by his hind legs. The sight momentarily distracted her from her swirling thoughts. Despite John's enigmatic nature, Hermione decided it was best not to pry too much. Considering Ron's aversion to Crookshanks and her own preoccupation with Buckbeak's case, she saw an opportunity. "John, could you look after Crookshanks for me?" she asked hopefully. "Look after Crookshanks?" "Of course," John replied, effortlessly lifting Crookshanks and gently scratching his belly, his smile warm and reassuring. Hermione's spirits lifted at his response. Remembering Crookshanks' reluctance to leave the Gryffindor common room, she added, "I'll give you the Gryffindor password." John's laughter filled the air, light and carefree. Hermione quickly scribbled down the password for him. Though she framed it as a favor, in reality, it meant John would simply pick up Crookshanks daily and ensure he spent his nights comfortably in the Gryffindor common room. Upon her return, Hermione noticed Ron's lingering irritation, while Harry's anger seemed to have mostly dissipated. Harry's curiosity was piqued when he saw Hermione, leading him to ask, "Hermione, what happened to your hair?" The wind from the Quidditch pitch had transformed Hermione's usually bushy hair into a wild, afro-like mane. Realizing this, she hurried back to her bedroom to confront her reflection in the mirror. The memory of John struggling to hold back his laughter, his amusement barely concealed, made her clench her teeth in frustration, much like an angry lion ready to roar. Chapter 143, The Terrified Dementor and the Limited Glove. The Dementors, now under the control of the Aurors, lived in a state of constant fear. Auror Ozzy Hurd, tasked with their oversight, couldn't help but rub the bruises on her forehead as she listened to the eerie howls of ghosts and wolves. What on earth are they wailing about? She wondered aloud. Lippy Kerber, standing beside her, shared her perplexed expression. Their goal was clear, to return all the Dementors to the ghastly confines of Azkaban. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Ozzy reflected on her role. As a seasoned Auror with years of experience, she was more than qualified to lead this operation. These Dementors are starving, and with Sirius Black lurking nearby, we can't risk sending them back to Azkaban just yet, Ozzy explained, her voice steady despite the tension. At the mention of Sirius, Lippy's face contorted with frustration. The Ministry of Magic had labeled Sirius as extremely dangerous, a threat even to an experienced Auror. The fact that such a dangerous individual had managed to hide within Hogwarts for over half a year was a source of great annoyance to Lippy, especially considering the recent resignation of Fudge. Seizing the moment, Lippy turned to Ozzy with a probing look. "Do you have any plans?" "Plans?" Ozzy returned his gaze, puzzled. With a sly chuckle, Lippy pulled out a cigarette, offering one to Ozzy before lighting his own. As veterans and habitual smokers, they both exhaled clouds of smoke, enveloping themselves in a brief moment of camaraderie. "The Ministry is in the midst of a power shift. Don't you think it's the perfect time to advance?" Lippy suggested, his tone laden with implication. Ozzy, well known to Lippy as a capable and dedicated Auror with a decade of service, had the skills and experience to be at the forefront. However, a past mistake involving a werewolf had tarnished her record, and the Ministry's previous efforts to undermine the Auror office had hindered her career progression, leaving her stuck in a role far beneath her capabilities. "If Tang Mi were still here, you'd surely be rising through the ranks alongside him," Lippy mused, though he quickly shifted the topic upon noticing Ozzy's pained expression. "We can't set our hopes too high with the current Auror office director. Let's just aim for a position that keeps us away from the fringes." Lippy was acutely aware of their slim chances for the vacant director position, given their lack of influential connections. He aspired for a more central role within the Auror office, away from the marginal tasks they were currently assigned. Ozzy, her lips curling around the cigarette, crushed it under her shoe with a sense of finality. "You know as well as I do, we don't have the pedigree. Those positions are reserved for purebloods." Both of mixed heritage, Ozzy and Lippy had become Aurors in the aftermath of Voldemort's fall, yet the ingrained prejudice towards pureblood supremacy within the Ministry still affected their career trajectories. Lippy, undeterred and with a glint of mischief in his eyes, hinted at a possibility. That might not be entirely true. Tang Mi was under his wing, and it's rumored he was the one who ousted Fudge. Before he could finish, Ozzy's glare silenced him. Raising his hands in surrender, he quickly changed the subject. Meanwhile, the Dementors, sensing their vulnerability, clustered together, retreating like a receding tide. Among them, a figure moved with purpose, selecting his targets as if choosing livestock. Suddenly, a Dementor, slower to retreat, found itself ensnared by a black silk thread, its screams echoing as it was dragged away by the tentacle-like filament. The remaining Dementors, in a frenzy of fear, scrambled to escape, unnoticed by the Aurors who never imagined someone would dare to confront a Dementor head-on. "What are you running from?" "I'm not going to kill you all," John remarked, having just captured a Dementor. Observing their panic, he couldn't help but scoff at their cowardice. "How about we return to Azkaban?" John clicked his tongue twice in disdain and left a chilling sentence promising his return tomorrow, sending the remaining Dementors into a frenzy, their decaying cloaks fluttering as if trying to escape. With the Dementors subdued, John returned to the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets. Utilizing the soul-eating curse, he stripped the Dementors of their essence, retracting the dark tendrils into his ring, leaving a mass of pure silver-white souls in his grasp. He meticulously tore the souls into strips, blending them into the cauldron along with unicorn horn to brew a potent soul-strengthening potion. Consuming the potion, John felt a tremor run through his body. The man he had encountered several times flashed before his eyes, and it took a strenuous half-hour for the vision to fade. He slumped over the table, drenched in sweat, feeling a slight rejuvenation within his soul. "The soul has recovered a bit," he murmured, noticing a slight restoration in his right-hand soul and a sense of temperance each time he endured torture. Opening his right hand, he observed the dark, malevolent threads transforming. A deep sense of foreboding filled John's gaze. He had only wielded this power against Dementors, but the thought of using it on other beings sent a shiver down his spine. Shaking off the terrifying thought, John examined the ring, noting its darker hue, a sign it was beginning to influence him. To wear a crown, one must bear its weight, he reminded himself, fully aware of the power's horror and vowing not to cross certain lines. In another section of the chamber, a furnace radiated intense heat, slowly melting a large piece of mithril. At this rate, it will take some time to fully melt, John noted, turning his attention to a mold unlike any he had used before. This mold was shaped like a hand, not a sword, meticulously crafted to embody the title of Johnny Silverhand. If one is to be called Silverhand, then a silver hand is essential, he mused, refining each line of the mold with a pocket knife. He envisioned a glove with 6 slots for gems, reminiscent of the Infinity Gauntlet from a certain saga. As the mithril liquefied, John poured it into the mold, infusing it with magic to hasten the solidification and cooling process. When he opened the mold, a delicate silver arm lay before him. Inserting magic crystals and gemstones into the 6 slots, he grasped the silver hand with his right, and it shattered, only to reassemble along his arm, transforming his hand into a silver marvel adorned with fine patterns and noble gems. Testing its mobility, John found no hindrance in movement. Clenching and unclenching his fist, he then fearlessly plunged his hand into the blazing furnace. The flames, capable of melting steel, felt surprisingly cool and comfortable against his silver skin. "The body is weak, but with this, it transcends," he remarked, a hint of pride in his voice. With a snap of his fingers, objects around him began to levitate, demonstrating the basic yet practical spells he had imbued in the glove. Conjuring a white orb of light in his palm, John directed it at a table, instantly shattering it. Nodding in approval at the glove's capabilities, he watched as the silver receded to his fingertips, finally condensing into a compact form. John's right hand was adorned with 2 rings, one silver and the other black, both of which stood out conspicuously. He slipped the silver ring into his pocket, musing about its potential transformation into a magical artifact akin to the Infinity Gauntlet once the Philosopher's Stone was completed. Exiting the Chamber of Secrets, John encountered Heinrich, who immediately inquired about his well-being. "All good," John replied, his attire consisting of a casual vest with sleeves rolled up, a stark contrast to the traditional wizard robes. Noticing Heinrich's lingering gaze on the firebolt broomstick stored within the secret chamber, John's lips curled into a smirk. "Fancy it, do you? Consider it a parting gift," he teased. Heinrich, however, demurred, his gaze dropping. "There's no need," he muttered, aware that Edgar's wealth could easily procure such a luxury. John, feeling a headache coming on, donned his wizard robe and gestured for Heinrich to follow. "Come with me," he said, leading the way to the room of requirement. As they approached, a door materialized from the seemingly solid wall, and John ushered Heinrich inside. The room transformed to reveal a dueling platform, catching Heinrich's attention. John ascended the platform first, with Heinrich following closely behind. "Since you have no need for the firebolt, let's focus on strengthening you instead," John proposed, his smile polite yet challenging. Heinrich's golden eyes ignited with a fervent gleam, a clear indication of his eagerness. It was evident that combat was what truly brought joy to Edgar. John's smile widened slightly, recognizing the irony in their situation. Despite Heinrich's enthusiasm for battle, John himself was far from lacking in strength. Chapter 144, Burning Money and Fairy Magic. On the final day of Christmas, Heinrich fought with the ferocity of a wild beast. His proficiency in fire magic was evident as he conjured fire bats from his wand, directing them towards John. In response, John, with a composed expression, swiftly transformed the stone pier into 2 formidable dogs that stood in front of him. Seizing a momentary advantage, he aimed his wand at Heinrich's feet, causing the ground beneath to give way. Heinrich managed to grasp the edge, preventing a fall, but not without injury. A jagged wooden splinter pierced his palm, and blood trickled down, staining his hand. As Heinrich struggled to his feet, John had already prepared a water orb, launching it at Heinrich with significant force. The spell, a water prison, engulfed Heinrich, replacing the air in his lungs with water. Just as Heinrich was on the brink of unconsciousness, John released the spell, allowing Heinrich to collapse to the ground, drenched and gasping for air. Approaching the fallen duelist, John offered a hand and helped him up, commending, "Your strength has significantly improved." This was no mere consolation. Heinrich's abilities had indeed seen considerable growth, a testament to the challenging environment and the caliber of his opponent. The fervor in Heinrich's eyes resembled that of a devout believer, and despite his pale, almost delicate appearance, he he managed a smile at John. As the day's training concluded, the two parted ways. John headed towards the Gryffindor common room, where the atmosphere was notably more vibrant, with students sharing tales of their holiday adventures. Upon his entrance, the room fell into an unusual silence. Crookshanks, however, seemed to have been anticipating John's return and greeted him by the fireplace. John affectionately stroked the cat before encouraging the students to continue their conversations and left with Crookshanks in tow. Outside, John released Crookshanks, who promptly scampered off without a backward glance. "It really doesn't show any affection at all," John mused, somewhat amused by the cat's indifference despite the treats he had provided. At that moment, Basil, John's faithful owl, arrived with a package. Inside was a book bound in dragon skin, an item John had been eagerly awaiting. "Tangmi really is efficient," John remarked, appreciating the effort taken to procure this ancient tome. The book, an ancient fairy magic record retrieved from Egypt, was a treasure trove of knowledge on fairy magic, a subject John was keen to explore. Upon examining the book, John noticed an emerald-green fluorescent mark on the cover, visible only to him. This mark, a symbol of ancient magic, intrigued him. Touching the mark, John was momentarily flooded with a goblin's memories, introducing him to a peculiar spell known as the Coin Curse. This spell, unlike any elemental magic John was familiar with, operated on a unique principle. The value of what one sacrifices directly influences the outcome. Intrigued by this concept, John spent the afternoon experimenting with the spell. After several attempts, he successfully repaired a shattered cup using a galleon, though he couldn't help but feel the exchange was somewhat uneconomical. Reflecting on the nature of goblin magic, John realized its cunning essence. Even in magic, goblins favored transactions that seemed to conceal hidden costs. With a newfound understanding and a bag of galleons at his disposal, John contemplated the practical applications of this spell, despite the apparent loss in value. His thoughts then turned to a damaged Quidditch goal, a challenge he had previously set aside due to the limitations of his spellcasting abilities. The Quidditch pitch, once bustling with the sounds of cheering and the swift movements of players, now bore the scars of recent havoc. Among the twin sets of 3 goalposts that stood like sentinels on either side of the field, the right trio had suffered damage. One post was left standing solitary, a testament to the chaos that had ensued. Before the break of dawn, when the world was still shrouded in the quietude of early morning, John made his way to the scene of destruction. With determination, he approached the damaged goalpost, his hands clutching a few galleons. Whispering the incantation for the coin curse, he watched as the galleons vanished from his grasp, one by one. As if guided by an unseen hand, the shattered remnants of the goalpost began to knit themselves together. Sawdust danced in the air, swirling around as the structure slowly regained its former glory. Initially, 5 galleons seemed to only restore half of the goalpost, prompting John to invest 10 more. To his amazement, the goalpost was fully restored, indistinguishable from its untouched counterparts. The efficacy of this repair far surpasses that of traditional repair spells, John mused, his eyes scanning the perfectly mended goalpost. A thought flickered through his mind, igniting a spark of curiosity. Could the coin curse heal injuries that defied conventional magical treatment? The prospect excited him, though he knew further experimentation was necessary. However, the cost of using the coin curse was not to be underestimated. Repairing a single goalpost had depleted 15 galleons from his purse. Without the backing of a substantial family fortune, such expenditures would be untenable. Attempts to substitute galleons with magically conjured gold had failed, reinforcing the principle that value must precede creation. With a heavy heart and a lighter purse, John returned to his dormitory, his thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities and limitations. He had hoped to use the coin curse to mend his injured right hand, but the attempt had been futile, leaving him both financially and physically diminished. Is the soul beyond repair? He pondered, his frustration palpable. The failure of the spell, coupled with the depletion of his funds, left him feeling cheated. It seemed there was truth to the tales of Goblin's deceitful nature. As the school term resumed, the great hall buzzed with the chatter of students. Among them, John noticed Daphne's gaze fixed upon him, her expression one of concern. Confused, he checked his face for any anomalies, finding none. Daphne's inquiry into his well-being took him by surprise. She had observed a change in his demeanor, particularly his lack of enthusiasm for meals. John brushed off her concerns, attributing it to a temporary loss of appetite. Unbeknownst to him, Daphne resolved to lift his spirits through the universal language of delicious food, unaware of the complexity of his troubles. In the divination class, John's focus shifted to honing his foresight abilities. With hands placed gently on the crystal ball, he sought clarity amidst the nebulous visions. Professor Trelawney, meanwhile, seemed to regard him with a preconceived notion of excellence. Despite the distractions, John remained diligent in his studies, acutely aware of the heightened security measures around the castle. The disappearance of Sirius Black had cast a shadow over Hogwarts, with Aurors and Dementors scouring the grounds in vain. Rumors circulated about Sirius's fate, but no evidence of his whereabouts surfaced, leaving the mystery unsolved and the Hogwarts community on edge. John often marveled at the ingenuity of the younger generation. On a particularly brisk day, Hagrid had managed to gather a cluster of salamanders for the class. The warmth they exuded made the chilly air bearable. Curiosity piqued, John picked up one of the salamanders, peering into its eyes, searching for a semblance of familiarity. For a moment, he thought he saw a reflection of his own eyes staring back at him. However, upon closer inspection, he realized it was just a trick of the light and gently placed the salamander back among its kin. As night fell, John found himself in a rather unconventional situation. He had caught a Dementor, intending it for his dinner. The cocoon it was wrapped in began to unravel, revealing the curse that had nearly consumed the entire ring, turning it an ominous shade of black. John consumed a potion meant to mend his soul, a remedy he had grown painfully familiar with. The potion's effects were immediate and intense, causing beads of sweat to form on his forehead. Yet this discomfort was something John had come to expect, almost welcome, in his quest for strength. In the solitude of his room, John unfurled the Marauder's map, a tool he had grown accustomed to consulting. The map never ceased to amuse him, especially with the odd sight of multiple Hermiones scurrying about, a glitch he found both perplexing and amusing. His gaze then drifted to Peter Pettigrew's icon, which was restlessly moving on Ron's bed, a sight that raised more questions than answers. Dumbledore's icon paced back and forth in his office, a testament to the headmaster's tireless dedication. Meanwhile, Lupin's icon was a constant presence in his office, hinting at the man's deep involvement in matters unknown. John's nightly observations had become a routine, a way to stay connected with the pulse of Hogwarts. Each icon's movement told a story, a piece of the larger puzzle he was slowly piecing together. In the quiet of the night, with the map spread before him, John felt a sense of belonging to this magical world, a world that was as complex as it was fascinating. Chapter 145, Daphne's Attempt at Cooking and the Patronus Charm. Harry was in a significantly better mood, albeit a bit restless. The anticipation of learning the Patronus Charm from Lupin on Thursday left him too excited to sleep. Deciding to take a walk, he donned his invisibility cloak and quietly left the Gryffindor common room. The recent break-in by Sirius had deterred most students from wandering the halls at night, but Harry felt emboldened by his cloak's protection. As he meandered without a particular destination in mind, Harry passed the room that once housed the three-headed dog. He caught a glimpse of a figure swiftly moving by. It was John. John moved silently, his form almost blending into the shadows under the moonlight. Harry, with his seeker's sharp eyes, managed to spot him. Curiosity piqued, Harry watched as John entered the room and decided to follow. Peering into the dark room, Harry felt a wave of nostalgia and a hint of apprehension, half expecting the three-headed dog to emerge. He pushed the door open wider, only to find the room empty. Puzzled, he wondered if he had been mistaken, but he was certain he had seen John enter. Illuminating his wand with a soft lumos, Harry conducted a thorough search but found no sign of John. John has always been enigmatic, Harry thought as he left, puzzled by John's mysterious ways. Shortly after Harry's departure, John emerged from a hidden chamber within the room, contemplating the need for more Dementors. Despite his physical weakness, John's mind was occupied with his tasks. The following day, John was confronted with an unusual sight. Daphne, with a dusting of flour on her nose, stood before him, presenting what she claimed were waffles. The burnt, unrecognizable lumps bore little resemblance to the breakfast treat. John, trying to maintain his composure, questioned if there was any reason for Daphne to harbor ill feelings towards him. Daphne, embarrassed by her failed attempt and feeling dejected, moved to discard her creation. John, however, gently stopped her, causing her to blush at the unexpected contact. She awkwardly suggested they not eat the ruined waffles, despite her mother's advice that a man would find anything made by someone he liked delicious. As Daphne turned away shyly, John, covered in maple syrup due to a mishap, couldn't help but comment on the situation. Daphne, realizing her mistake, rushed to clean up the mess, apologizing profusely. This chapter showcases the lighter moments of life at Hogwarts, highlighting the characters' attempts to navigate their personal challenges and relationships. Harry's curiosity and John's mysterious activities hint at deeper plots unfolding, while Daphne's cooking disaster adds a touch of humor and human connection amidst the magical chaos. John took out a towel and wiped off the cold maple syrup that clung to his face. He caught a glimpse of Heinrich's mouth twitching at the corners, a clear sign he was fighting back laughter. Taking a deep breath, John decided it was best not to venture outside today. Daphne attempted to assist, but John quickly stopped her. "Don't worry, stand back. I'll handle it myself." With his wand in hand, John cast a cleansing charm, effectively removing the syrup. However, he still felt a slight stickiness, prompting him to head to the bathroom for another shower. Daphne, seeking comfort, buried her head in Pansy's arms and lamented, "I've messed up." Pansy, ever the comforting friend, reassured her, "It's all right, John isn't upset." Upon hearing she wasn't in trouble, Daphne's spirits lifted, and she declared with newfound determination, "Then I'll just have to try harder next time." Pansy couldn't help but wonder, does John know I encouraged her? Will he hold it against me? In the days that followed, John found himself on the receiving end of Daphne's various antics, pondering if this was her way of retaliating against Tom for stepping on her homework with his muddy shoes. While consulting the Marauders map, John noticed Lupin's peculiar behavior. Seemingly, he's searching for something. Heading to the kitchen at this hour? Could he be hungry? John mused, watching as Lupin moved from the kitchen to the faculty office, then elsewhere. Though puzzled by Lupin's actions, John remained focused on his own mission to confront the Dementors. Employing the disillusionment charm, John left the castle undetected and made his way to the Dementors' lair. He observed a significant decrease in their numbers, a fact that puzzled the Aurors and Ministry of Magic alike, leading to speculation that Sirius Black might be enacting revenge on the Dementors for his time in Azkaban. Upon capturing a Dementor, John was startled by a sudden shout, "Who's there?" Realizing he had been discovered, he didn't hesitate to use an illusion spell and his meteor shoes to make a swift escape. Ozzy and Lippy, arriving shortly after, deduced that the mysterious figure was Sirius Black, based on the glimpse of black hair. This revelation prompted an immediate search by the Aurors, under the suspicion that Sirius had mastered a dark spell capable of silently capturing Dementors. Meanwhile, back at Hogwarts, Harry Potter approached Professor Lupin with a heavy heart, determined to learn the Patronus charm after reading about Sirius Black's actions in the Daily Prophet. Lupin, recognizing the gravity of Harry's request, agreed to teach him. Despite the complexity of the spell, Lupin was confident in Harry's potential, having hoped initially that John Wick, a master of the Patronus charm, would be the one to teach Harry. However, Lupin hesitated, harboring doubts about John that he chose not to voice, leaving Harry curious and eager to learn more. Harry's elder Lupin harbored a deep-seated concern about Harry's interactions with John. This apprehension stemmed from the innate intuition of a werewolf, which screamed that John was a figure shrouded in danger. Despite Harry's gaze, filled with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, Lupin remained undeterred as he proceeded to open the crate he had brought along. Within moments, the boggart, a creature adept at sensing the fears lurking in the hearts of those around it, burst forth. It immediately transformed into the shape of a Dementor, the very embodiment of Harry's deepest fears. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, Harry tried to summon his Patronus with the incantation Expecto Patronum, but his efforts were in vain. Instead of the powerful spell, the words that escaped his lips were "Call the Lord," a clear sign of his panic and confusion. As the situation escalated, the comforting voice of his mother echoed in Harry's mind, a soothing presence amidst the chaos. However, it was not enough to keep him anchored to consciousness, and he succumbed to the overwhelming fear, fainting. Lupin, witnessing the distressing scene unfold, acted swiftly. With practiced ease, he managed to subdue the boggart, forcing it back into the crate from which it had emerged. The incident served as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in their world, dangers that Harry was still learning to navigate. Lupin's protective instincts towards Harry were further reinforced, his resolve to shield him from harm stronger than ever. Chapter 146, Lupin's Trial and Level 5 Runes. John had recently begun to suspect something was amiss with his dog. It wasn't just Tom, but Crookshanks seemed to be in on it too. Watching Tom exit the lounge, John glanced at the empty dog food container and pondered. He's eaten enough for 3 dogs, yet hasn't gained any weight. Is this some kind of joke? Tom required an ample supply of dog food to assert his dominance over Fang, prompting John to always bring 3 times the usual amount. However, the dog food that was supposed to last until the semester's end was already depleted. Even John, who could be slow on the uptake at times, realized something was off. Determined to uncover the mystery of the disappearing dog food, John cast a disillusionment charm on himself and stealthily followed Tom. Unaware of John's presence, Tom met up with Crookshanks, who had also sneaked out, and they left together. The cat and dog duo exhibited an unusual harmony, primarily because Crookshanks seemed to be the brains of the operation, while Tom played a supportive role. Their destination was the Humping Willow. John watched in disbelief as Crookshanks skillfully pressed a paw against the knot on the tree, a trick that had taken John a month to discover. Yet, here was a cat, seemingly aware of it too. With the Humping Willow momentarily immobilized, Tom darted inside. Crookshanks then took up a watchful position, guarding the entrance to the secret passage. John attempted to follow, but Crookshanks blocked the entrance. After a short while, Tom emerged, the dog food nowhere in sight, leaving John's suspicions frozen in realization. Were these 2 pets secretly caring for something in the Shrieking Shack? And how did they come to know about this hidden passage? Filled with questions, John decided to investigate further. Crookshanks, ever the clever one, took a circuitous route before leaving, as if to throw off any potential followers. John couldn't help but admire the cat's intelligence, musing that Crookshanks must have inherited Hermione's intellect, making him the Hermione among cats. However, John was not easily deterred. After casting a supersensory charm to ensure Crookshanks had not returned, he ventured into the secret passage beneath the Humping Willow. It had been a while since his last visit to the Shrieking Shack, a place he had gradually forgotten about since his last encounter with Malfoy. The eerie atmosphere of the Shrieking Shack greeted him as he entered. A piece of dog food on the floor caught his eye, prompting him to inspect it closely, wand at the ready. "Reveal yourself," he commanded, tapping his wand against the furniture, but nothing out of the ordinary appeared. "Strange," he muttered, finding nothing but the dog food after a thorough search. With that, he turned to leave. Shortly after his departure, a figure emerged from a hole shaped like a dog's burrow beneath a large tree outside the Shrieking Shack. "Clever little wizard," Sirius Black mused, a human-like expression on his face. As an animagus, Sirius possessed a keen sense of smell, far superior to that of ordinary dogs. This heightened sense of smell was his assurance of evading capture by Aurors, as a disillusionment charm could hide one's appearance but not their scent. The Shrieking Shack was no longer a safe haven for Sirius, who had to find a new hideout. His last attempt to approach Harry at the Quidditch pitch had ended with him being pursued by Dementors, making him wary of any direct contact with Harry. Fortunately, he had 2 loyal friends willing to assist him. All he needed was the right opportunity to confront his target personally. As anger and hatred flickered across the face of the large black dog, Sirius began to dig the burrow deeper, ensuring a means of escape. John, having doubled back in hopes of finding something he might have missed, found nothing. The shrieking shack remained a mystery, its secrets hidden just outside his grasp. John had no means of discerning the events unfolding through the Marauder's map. On his return from the castle's exterior, he encountered Professor Lupin. With a nod of acknowledgement, John was prepared to continue on his way when suddenly, a swift movement caught his attention. Turning, he found himself face to face with Lupin's wand. "Is Professor Lupin considering harming a student at Hogwarts?" John inquired, his tone laced with disbelief. In the deserted corridor, Lupin's gaze bore into him, questioning, "Why didn't you dodge?" John's response was marked by an unsettling calmness, uncharacteristic of a third-year student. "Because I'm not afraid," he stated simply, his demeanor unflinching. Lupin, taken aback, lowered his wand, offering an apology. "I'm sorry. I thought you might be Sirius Black in disguise, given his recent intrusion into the castle." John, unfazed, acknowledged the misunderstanding. "I understand. I've just returned from outside." His next words carried a hint of mystery, as long as it's not about murder. The mention of murder caught Lupin off guard, prompting John to shift the conversation towards Hogwarts history, expressing a desire to compile a collection of stories, particularly those involving murder. Lupin, sensing John's keen interest, couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. As they parted ways, both men were left pondering the other's true intentions. Meanwhile, John's magical abilities continued to grow, evidenced by his self-upgraded level 5 runes. His focus then turned to the silver Wick sword, which he enhanced with a powerful enchantment, ensuring that wounds inflicted by it were beyond magical repair. He also established a mystical connection with the sword, ensuring it would come to his aid in times of peril. Despite his advancements, John was reminded of his physical limitations when wielding the sword. His attention then shifted to the preparation of a soul-repairing potion, a task made challenging by the scarcity of Dementor souls and the increased vigilance of the Aurors. John's encounter with Lupin and his subsequent actions underscored his complex relationship with the magical world, marked by a blend of curiosity, ambition, and a hint of darkness. As he navigated the challenges ahead, it was clear that John was no ordinary student, his journey intertwined with the secrets and shadows of Hogwarts. To ensure Sirius Black's capture, the Ministry of Magic had heightened security measures, especially around Hogsmeade. Despite these precautions, John believed that if those outside Hogwarts remained elusive, those within Hogsmeade's vicinity could still be apprehended. With this in mind, he ventured out, utilizing the secret passage hidden by the one-eyed witch statue. His destination was Honeyduke's candy store, from where he emerged under the cloak of a disillusionment charm to blend seamlessly with his surroundings. The streets of Hogsmeade were deserted at night, save for the eerie presence of Dementors gliding through the darkness like specters and a handful of Aurors patrolling the area. These guardians of the law, however, did not deter John. His attention was quickly drawn to a solitary Dementor drifting away from its counterparts. John's plan was bold, yet he moved with a purpose, his steps silent against the cobblestone paths. The Dementors, with their soul-sucking kisses and the despair they spread, were formidable foes. Yet in the shadowed corners of Hogsmeade, John saw an opportunity. The Aurors, vigilant as they were against threats like Sirius Black, had not anticipated an attack on a Dementor itself. As he approached his target, John's mind raced with strategies. The Dementors, though fearsome, were not invincible. He knew that their strength lay in their ability to feed on fear and despair, but John harbored a resolve that was immune to such tactics. His plan was not just to confront the Dementor, but to challenge the very nature of their existence. The night air was cold, and a thin mist hung over Hogsmeade, adding a ghostly ambiance to the already tense atmosphere. John's heart beat steadily, a testament to his courage and determination. The Aurors, preoccupied with their own patrols, remained unaware of the drama unfolding in the shadows. John's encounter with the Dementor would not be an easy battle. It required precision, bravery, and a deep understanding of the dark creatures. Yet he was driven by a sense of duty and a desire to protect, qualities that defined the very essence of those who stood against the darkness. As he prepared to face the Dementor, John knew that the outcome of this confrontation could have far-reaching consequences. It was not just about proving his own strength, but about challenging the fear that Dementors represented. In the silent streets of Hogsmeade, under the watchful eyes of the Aurors and the haunting presence of the Dementors, John was ready to make his stand. Chapter 147, The Thrill of Quidditch. Quidditch is an exhilarating sport, perhaps made even more so by the unique physical capabilities of wizards compared to muggles. The game has no set time limit and continues until the golden snitch is caught. Legend has it that the longest Quidditch match lasted an astounding 3 months. As John watched the green and blue figures of the Slytherin and Ravenclaw teams clash in the sky, he understood the relentless nature of the game. Despite Ravenclaw's often understated presence, their strength and strategic minds have always made them formidable opponents. However, against a Slytherin team bolstered by considerable resources, they faced a tough challenge. Ravenclaw's seeker, Chu Zhang, a fourth-year student, showcased impressive skills. Yet she struggled to match Draco Malfoy's pace, despite her adept flying keeping her in the game. John, observing Chu Zhang's grace and beauty, couldn't help but notice Cedric Diggory's concern for her, especially after Malfoy's aggressive maneuver nearly caused her to fall. Cedric's admiration for Chu Zhang was evident, his gaze lingering on her with a mix of concern and fascination. The Quidditch teams of Hogwarts each had their distinct styles. Gryffindor was known for their straightforward approach, Hufflepuff for their technical and enduring gameplay, Ravenclaw for their meticulous strategies, and Slytherin for their aggressive tactics and not shying away from bending the rules. Slytherin players, like Flint and Malfoy, were notorious for their ruthless plays, which often bordered on foul play. In the end, Slytherin narrowly defeated Ravenclaw. Malfoy approached with arrogance, only to be ignored by Cedric, who rushed to comfort Chu Zhang. Cedric's words were filled with disdain for Malfoy's unsportsmanlike conduct, calling him out for his dirty and despicable tactics. John, witnessing this, teasingly confronted Malfoy about his style of play, hinting at the influence of his father's own questionable tactics during his time at Hogwarts. As February approached, John found himself contemplating the future, particularly Nagini's. Having spent an extended period as a snake, Nagini's transformation back into a human left her with significant injuries that would take over a year to heal fully. Through her letters, John sensed Nagini's gratitude for regaining her humanity, despite the physical toll her transformation had taken. John recognized the need to consider Nagini's future, given her unique circumstances. Not quite a muggle, but also not a wizard in the traditional sense, Nagini's past reliance on a blood curse for her abilities left her without formal magical education. While she might not fit into conventional roles within the wizarding world, John began to ponder alternative paths that could utilize Nagini's unique talents and experiences. John's expression softened, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "You're learning to make chocolate?" he asked, his tone unexpectedly gentle. The tension in Daphne's shoulders eased slightly, and she nodded, her blush deepening. "Yes," I thought. "Maybe I could make some for you if you'd like." John considered this for a moment, the idea of homemade chocolate from Daphne intriguing him. Last year's Valentine's Day had left a sour taste in his mouth, thanks to Gilderoy Lockhart's over-the-top antics. The thought of a quieter, more personal gesture appealed to him. "I'd like that," he finally said, offering her a small, encouraging smile. "Thank you, Daphne." Relief washed over Daphne's face, her smile brightening. "I'll do my best to make them delicious," she promised, her voice filled with newfound confidence. Changing the subject, John's thoughts returned to the more pressing matters at hand. The expansion of his business ventures in both Nocturne Alley and Diagon Alley required careful management, and the idea of forming a Nocturne Alley strike team lingered in his mind. The recent attack on his store by Fudge had only highlighted the need for such a team, especially with the Ministry's increased rines towards him. Rufus Scrimgeour's temporary position as Minister of Magic added another layer of complexity to the situation. John knew he needed to tread carefully, maintaining his network of support while also preparing for any potential threats. The mystery of Sirius Black's whereabouts also occupied his thoughts. John couldn't shake the feeling that Black was hiding somewhere within Hogwarts, possibly utilizing secret passages unknown even to the Marauders map. The idea that Black might be targeting Harry Potter added urgency to his concerns. Despite his efforts, including spells placed in the Shrieking Shack, Black remained elusive. As Valentine's Day approached, the atmosphere within Hogwarts shifted, with hints of romance in the air. John's conversation with Daphne was a welcome distraction from his worries, offering a moment of lightness amidst the ongoing challenges. However, the reality of his responsibilities, both to his business and to the safety of those around him, remained ever present in his mind. Catching a glimpse of John's frightened expression, she held her breath so tightly she nearly choked. In a fit of anger, she stomped on John's foot before storming off. John, rubbing his sore right foot, felt a surge of relief that he had never had to endure Daphne's cooking. He mused that even an iron stomach couldn't withstand her culinary attempts for long. Daphne's dishes, lacking in color, aroma, and taste, often left much to be desired. Sometimes the ingredients were barely edible, a fact that sent shivers down his spine. Watching Daphne's retreating figure, he sighed. Daphne is a wonderful person, as long as she stays away from the kitchen. His attention then shifted to the courtyard, where Cedric and Cho Chang were engaged in a lively conversation, their relationship seemingly flourishing. The air was thick with the sweet scent of budding romance. On the other side, Draco Malfoy's relentless pursuit of Harry Potter was evident in his constant provocations and taunts, especially aimed at Ron Weasley for his fondness for chicken legs. John observed all this with a detached air, remarking, "That kid has quite the crush on him," wondering whether Harry had wronged Draco in some way to warrant such persistent attention. The following day, Harry's performance on the Firebolt during the match against Ravenclaw was nothing short of spectacular, earning him cheers and adulation from the crowd. Cedric, meanwhile, was there to console Cho, showcasing the depth of their connection. In these moments, the dynamics between the students of Hogwarts were as complex as they were fascinating, with each interaction revealing more about their characters and relationships. Chapter 148, Cold War and Weiwei. There's something undeniably magical about the unexpected, akin to a Gryffindor joining a Slytherin team. John was perplexed, witnessing yet another quarrel among the younger students. This time, it was Ron and Hermione at odds, with Ron discovering a pool of blood on the bed and accusing Hermione's cat, Crookshanks, of devouring his pet rat, Scabbers. The argument escalated quickly, leaving Hermione in tears and fleeing the scene. Harry, too, harbored suspicions about Crookshanks, especially after finding ginger cat fur in the room. John found himself caught between Hermione's disappointment and Daphne's intense gaze. He felt overwhelmed, sensing the need to shift his stance on the matter. Malfoy, typically disdainful of Hermione, pretended not to notice the commotion, focusing intently on his pumpkin juice as if it were the most exquisite beverage. Goyle and Crabbe, visibly uncomfortable, kept their heads down, silently eating their bread. The tension was palpable. Daphne's frustration was evident as she aggressively stabbed at her plate of bacon, while Hermione seemed too distraught to notice the awkward atmosphere. John, feeling a headache coming on, sighed and offered his support to Hermione. "I'll try to help you sort this out. Don't be sad." A sudden crack interrupted the tense silence. Malfoy ducked even lower, Goyle choked on his bread, and Crabbe, oblivious to the tension, continued eating. John turned to see a broken plate, thinking to himself that such strength would be wasted if not channeled into swordsmanship. "I'm full," Daphne declared abruptly, leaving the table in a huff. John could tell she was upset, a clear indication of the deep-seated prejudice between Slytherin and Gryffindor. "However, I don't believe she's dead," John mused aloud, taking a sip of water. He was confident that the rat, Scabbers, wasn't so easily killed. The real issue remained elusive, but John planned to use the Marauder's map to investigate further. Hermione looked up at John with hopeful, tear-filled eyes. "Some things aren't as straightforward as they appear. You should know there's something unusual about that rat," John hinted, keeping the details to himself. As class time approached, John turned to find Hermione had already left, her departure so swift he hadn't even noticed. After finishing his meal, John noticed Malfoy finally looking up from his pumpkin juice, a conflicted expression on his face. After a moment of hesitation, Malfoy inquired, "John, I heard from Heinrich that you have a firebolt." He quickly added, "It's not for me. Flint was complaining about Potter having one, and he thinks I won't be able to keep up." John was taken aback by the request. "So you want me to give it to you?" "No, just let me borrow it for the finals," Malfoy clarified, not wanting to seem greedy. John smiled, understanding Malfoy's predicament. "Go to the Star Club this afternoon. You know where it is. The firebolt will be there." Malfoy's surprise was evident, grateful for John's willingness to help, though he knew such assistance wasn't without conditions. "Tell Flint to show some respect to the Seeker with the firebolt in the future," John added softly, knowing the value of the firebolt would ensure Flint's compliance. Meanwhile, Hermione appeared to be constantly busy, leaving John to his thoughts and the crystal ball before him. As he peered into the foggy orb, it seemed as though hands were parting the mist, revealing a vision of Hermione speaking to him anxiously. The scene shifted to Professor Snape, unconscious as if he'd hit a wall, followed by an overwhelming presence of Dementors, more terrifying than any Quidditch match. The prophecy ended abruptly, and John found Professor Trelawney standing before him, eager to hear his interpretation. The surrounding students looked on, holding their breath in anticipation, their expressions a mix of horror and fascination. John was apprehensive that his next words might trigger another wave of fear among his classmates, reminiscent of the time Lavender's rabbit met its untimely demise. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke, "I envisioned someone lying unconscious, their cheeks stained with blood trickling down from their hair." Lavender, still haunted by her past experience, let out a terrified scream, as if she was the one foreseen in John's prophecy. The room was instantly enveloped in a palpable atmosphere of dread. Harry and Ron exchanged uncertain glances, silently questioning the authenticity of John's vision. Ron, ever the skeptic, whispered to Harry, "He's probably just trying to scare everyone. Remember, he accidentally got it right last time." Harry was about to agree when John, still peering into the crystal ball, mentioned the black dog and the man with black hair. He paused, his body tensing slightly, though he seemed unaware of his own discomfort. Sybil Trelawney, the divination teacher, was quick to praise John, her voice devoid of its usual frivolity. "You are the most gifted seer I have encountered, a true prophet in the making," she declared, awarding him an overly generous 50 points, which left John feeling undeservedly rewarded. After class, a curious Harry approached John. "What did you mean by black dog?" John, somewhat perplexed by the question, replied, "Exactly that, a black dog. It appeared in the crystal ball, so I mentioned it." Harry's mind raced to the black dog he had seen previously, a sense of unease washing over him. Ron, joining the conversation, was met with an unexpected admonition from John. "Ron, you really shouldn't be arguing with Hermione." Ron, visibly irritated, retorted, "Her cat ate my scabbers, and she won't even admit it. She's always so self-righteous." He continued to vent his frustrations about Hermione's actions regarding his firebolt, unaware that Hermione was within earshot. She walked away, her expression darkening with sadness. John's tone turned serious, and Ron was taken aback by his intensity. "Ron, your words were harsh. The firebolt's origins were unknown. Would you have Harry risk falling from the sky?" John's demeanor was stern as he added, "Sometimes it's best to keep your thoughts to yourself, especially with Sirius Black on the loose. Think before you speak." Ron was left speechless, unable to formulate a response. Harry, feeling the need to defend Ron, was stopped by John's raised hand. "Is trust so difficult for you?" John's question resonated with the onlookers, some of whom were Slytherins, secretly enjoying the spectacle. John's lecture left Harry feeling uncomfortable, prompting him to reflect on his friendship with Hermione. "How long have you known Hermione? Can't you trust her not to be jealous of your firebolt?" John was exasperated by the seemingly perpetual suspicion among his Gryffindor peers. Draco Malfoy, observing the scene, gleefully pointed out to Marcus Flint, "See, I told you John had a Slytherin streak." Despite the tension, John believed that once emotions settled, Harry and the others would come to understand. Later, John visited Hagrid's cabin, where he was greeted by an awkwardly dressed Hagrid who seemed to be experimenting with suits far too large for an average person. Hagrid, changing out of his beige suit, shared exciting news with John. Wei Wei, the unicorn you spared, is willing to provide you with unicorn horns." John, momentarily taken aback by the mention of Wei Wei, was reminded of the unicorn he had intentionally released. Unicorns naturally shed their horns, and Wei Wei had generously offered one to John. "Thank you, Hagrid. I'll be right there," John said, waving his hand as he prepared to depart. Before leaving, he turned to Hagrid and suggested, "Perhaps you could trim your beard a bit. It might make you look more distinguished." Hagrid nodded in agreement and waved goodbye. Hagrid was accustomed to John venturing into the Forbidden Forest. After all, John's magical prowess was well known. As John made his way through the forest, a white unicorn emerged from the thicket. It was the same unicorn John had saved before. A pauper. Ouching gently, the unicorn nuzzled John's palm, a gesture that left John momentarily taken aback. Despite his many adventures, John had never considered himself the epitome of purity. The unicorn, whom John had affectionately named Wei Wei, beckoned him to follow, turning her head as if to say, "Come along." John, fearless and curious, followed the path Wei Wei had taken, stepping into the deeper mysteries of the Forbidden Forest. The forest around them seemed to whisper secrets, the canopy above barely letting through shafts of light. John's senses were heightened, aware of the magic that pulsed through this ancient place. Wei Wei led him with a grace that only a creature of her kind could possess, her mane shimmering under the occasional ray of sunlight that managed to pierce the dense foliage. As they ventured further, John couldn't help but marvel at the bond forming between him and the unicorn. It was a reminder of the magic that existed in the world, often hidden but always present. The Forbidden Forest, with all its dangers and wonders, was a testament to the untamed magic that thrived beyond the walls of Hogwarts. John's journey with Wei Wei was not just a walk through the forest, it was a journey into the heart of magic itself, a reminder of the mysteries that awaited those brave enough to explore them. Chapter 149, The Unicorn Herd and the Second Intrusion. The Forbidden Forest, predating the establishment of Hogwarts, is home to a myriad of magical creatures. As legends of these creatures spread from a certain century onwards, they attracted the attention of many, brave knights and sycophantic courtiers alike. Dragons, known for hoarding treasures, drew the king's knights into battle. Elves and fairies, with their enchanting voices, became targets for circus slave traders. Unicorns, however, fared slightly better due to their majestic appearance and the purity they symbolized. Despite not being as mythical as the legends suggesting they could only be tamed by virgins, unicorns' aversion to dark magic was indeed a fact. Given John's previous use of dark magic, he theoretically should not have been a favored presence among unicorns. Guided by Wei Wei, John arrived at a serene location where the forest opened up to reveal trees laden with enormous fruits and clear streams meandered through. Here, a group of majestic unicorns grazed peacefully. Among them, John noticed a centaur observing from a distance, which sparked his curiosity about the centaur's preferences. One unicorn, in particular, stood out with its thick horn, radiant white coat, and imposing size. When Wei Wei approached this unicorn, she affectionately touched its spiraled horn, resembling a child seeking comfort from a parent. John was taken aback when the unicorn spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "Are you the student who saved Wei Wei?" Introducing himself as Clark, the unicorn expressed his gratitude towards John for saving his daughter, revealing a golden mark of ancient magic on his body. John, realizing the voice was a result of magical communication rather than the unicorn actually speaking, introduced himself with a polite bow. "My name is John Wick, and it's an honor to be welcomed into the unicorn habitat." Unicorns are typically solitary creatures, making the sight of over 100 of them gathered here behind a hidden waterfall all the more extraordinary. Without Wei Wei's guidance, John would have never discovered this secluded haven. Clark, sensing something amiss with John's right hand, gently enveloped it in a silvery light that emanated from his horn. The light, reminiscent of moonlight, seemed to mend John's soul, albeit slowly. After the treatment, Clark admitted, "Your soul has been injured, and my abilities can only do so much." John, feeling a significant improvement and less tremor in his hand, expressed his gratitude. The healing he experienced surpassed that of any soul potion, a testament to the ancient and sacred power of unicorns. Wei Wei, noticing her father's kindness towards John, nudged him playfully. Clark explained with a smile, She's inviting you further in. What you seek is within. Intrigued, John followed Weiwei through a lush, vegetated hollow in a tree. Beyond it lay a breathtaking sight, a cavern filled with unicorn horns, their varied luminescence filling the space. Weiwei, touching John's head gently with her horn, conveyed through a sweet voice, "This is where we unicorns shed our horns. You may take what you need from here." John was awestruck. The sheer number of horns, accumulated over centuries before Hogwarts was even founded, was staggering. This hidden trove was a testament to the long and rich history of the unicorns residing in the Forbidden Forest. The hollowed-out tree stood like a giant, offering shelter to the group. John was amazed to find that despite being hollowed out, the tree thrived with life. Its roots were robust, and its leaves shimmered with vitality. In that case, thank you, Weiwei. John expressed his gratitude sincerely, without a hint of pretense. As he sifted through the myriad of unicorn horns, some of which had aged into jade over thousands of years, resembling precious gems, John felt as though he had stumbled upon a treasure trove. The potential impact of releasing these into the magical world's economy was staggering. After careful selection, he chose 10 horns. John took out a necklace adorned with gold and precious stones, crafting it to be long enough to drape around V's neck. "I hope you accept this as a token of my friendship," he said. The necklace, a new creation, contained an iron armor curse that could automatically restore magical life. The glowing gemstone necklace delighted Weiwei. She gently touched John with her horn, and her voice resonated. "Then we are friends, John." Clark, observing from a distance, felt a surge of happiness. A smaller unicorn approached him with concern, saying, "Clark, that child touched the soul." Clark was aware but remained unfazed, replying, "But he's good, isn't he?" As Weiwei's father and the king of the unicorn herd, Clark could see the soul wound on John's body and the chaos within his magic. Weiwei escorted John back to the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where he learned the communication magic from her. This mind magic was a precursor to legilimency, born from the same magic that led to the creation of the soul-hunting mind. The origins of wizards remained a mystery, but their abilities were known to be derived from magical creatures. They learned to control fire from dragons, read minds from unicorns, and apparate from ball birds. The rise of wizards was a result of continuous learning from magical creatures, with legends even suggesting Merlin studied among them. This foundation made the existence of parseltongues and dragon whisperers less surprising. John pondered whether ancient magic could be the origin of blood magic, considering the inherited nature of talents like parseltongue. Unlike wizard magic, ancient magic existed as a result of magic's erosion in the quest for magical knowledge. In the wizarding world, there were individuals born with innate abilities like legilimency or transfiguration, talents that required no learning but were engraved on their bodies. After bidding farewell to Weiwei, John emerged from the Forbidden Forest at dusk. He noticed the lights in Hagrid's hut and saw Hagrid diligently reviewing manuscripts collected by Hermione. Hagrid was deeply grateful for her help. John hoped for a resolution to the Cold War between Hermione and Harry. Sensing John's presence, Fang looked up, but John gestured for silence, and Fang obediently lowered his head, tail wagging. After waving goodbye, John headed towards the castle. Upon entering the castle, John sensed that the monitoring magic he had set was triggered, a spell designed to activate after curfew. He summoned the Marauder's map with a touch and declared, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." The map revealed ink lines stretching and outlining to form a detailed map of the castle. A black dot labeled Sirius Black, with accompanying footprints, was moving towards Gryffindor Tower. "He is still there." John hurried towards Gryffindor Tower, realizing that taking shortcuts would be futile since Sirius Black was more familiar with them. Upon arrival, John was shocked to see Sirius Black entering the Gryffindor common room, not through violence, but as if he belonged there. Driven by urgency, John dashed towards Gryffindor Tower, neglecting to cast the disillusionment charm to conceal his presence. On his way, he encountered Mrs. Norris on the stairs. The cat didn't utter a word but observed as John hurried past. The sound of hurried footsteps caught the attention of Argus Filch, who caught a glimpse of John's retreating figure. Assuming it was a student out of bed after hours, Filch eagerly gave chase. Unfortunately for Filch, John's speed far exceeded his own, making it impossible for him to catch up. As John neared Gryffindor Tower, the portrait of Sir Cadogan swung open to reveal a man with disheveled black hair, dressed in tattered clothes. As he ran, his form began to morph, transforming into a large black dog with a notably thick build. Meanwhile, in the Gryffindor boys' dormitory, panic ensued. Ron's voice pierced the air, laden with terror. "Black! Sirius Black! He's got a knife!" The urgency in his voice echoed the gravity of the situat, Ion, signaling the imminent danger posed by the notorious fugitive. Chapter 150, The Nine-Turn Jazz, Big Intestine, and the Pursuit. The Gryffindor common room was in a state of disarray. Despite the chaos, the Weasley twins were adamant about continuing the celebration. Professor McGonagall, looking quite displeased, shut the door with a forceful thud. She had initially thought the uproar was a result of Gryffindor's victory over Ravenclaw. While she shared in the joy, she believed that maintaining order within the school was paramount. Percy Weasley found himself at the center of criticism. Many argued that he should have enforced order in the common room instead of allegedly using his position as head boy to sanction the ongoing festivities. "I didn't approve, Professor," Percy protested, visibly upset and swelling with indignation like a pufferfish under threat. "I was on the verge of sending everyone to bed when Ron claimed he had a nightmare." "It wasn't a nightmare," Ron interjected, unable to tolerate the misrepresentation of his experience. "Professor, I woke up to find Sirius Black standing by my bed, wielding a knife." His voice trembled with fear, and a hint of resentment towards Percy for belittling his ordeal was evident. Professor McGonagall looked at him with a mix of surprise and skepticism, as if she were addressing a child awakened from a bad dream. "Don't make a fool of yourself, Weasley," she chided, pointing towards the portrait hole. "How could he possibly have gotten through there?" "Ask him," Ron insisted, confident in what he had seen. He gestured towards Sir Cadogan's portrait. "Ask him if he saw anything." Despite her reservations, Professor McGonagall approached the portrait and inquired, "Sir Cadogan, did you permit a man to enter Gryffindor Tower just now?" Sir Cadogan responded with a booming voice, filled with a sense of grandeur. "Of course, my honorable lady. I diligently followed the protocols of gatekeeping, as befits a knight of my standing." His declaration resonated through the common room, lending credence to Ron's claim. "You did what?" Professor McGonagall was aghast. "Was this intentional or an accident?" "He had the password," Sir Cadogan announced proudly. "A week's worth of passwords, my lady. He read them from a note." "Intentional, then." Professor McGonagall's expression turned to one of disbelief and anger as she quickly returned to the common room, her face pale. "Who," she demanded, her voice shaking, "is the complete fool who wrote down this week's passwords and carelessly discarded them?" As her question hung in the air, two individuals visibly paled. Neville Longbottom, trembling, raised his hand and whispered, "I'm sorry, Professor. I can't seem to remember the passwords." He looked as though he wished the ground would swallow him whole, his body shaking with fear. Professor McGonagall fixed Neville with a stern gaze, frustrated by his forgetfulness. She decided to postpone dealing with him, as the immediate priority was to search the castle for Sirius Black. In the crowd, Hermione Granger clutched her book tightly, her eyes wide with disbelief and shock. She, too, had written down the passwords, having given the note to John. Meanwhile, John was preoccupied with the Marauder's map, tracking a moving dot that represented Sirius Black. "This guy is incredibly fast," he mused, finding it difficult to keep up despite his regular physical training. "We both have 2 legs. How can he be so much faster?" Activating his enchanted shoes, John's speed surged. The staircases had previously hindered his pace, but now on flat ground, he had no such constraints. His speed increased dramatically, and he quickly closed the distance between himself and the moving dot. After navigating a spiral staircase, John opted for a daring leap to the bottom. Upon landing, a gentle magical force cushioned his fall, a protective enchantment of Hogwarts designed to prevent injuries from falls. John was hot on the heels of Sirius Black, their chase weaving through the corridors of Hogwarts with the familiarity of seasoned players in this game of cat and mouse. As John neared the exit, a large black dog burst through the doors of Hogwarts, its form blurring into an afterimage as it raced into the night. Behind them, Filch, the caretaker, stumbled in his pursuit, humorously wishing the onlookers an early New Year as he mixed up his left foot with his right. He watched the fading afterimage with a sense of desperation, questioning if age had finally caught up with him, rendering him unable to keep pace with the youth of today. Unaware of Filch's futile chase, John had eyes only for Sirius. He knew that continuing this pursuit would take him beyond the boundaries mapped by the Marauder's map, but he didn't hesitate. Activating the stored energy in his meteor shoes, a brilliant light emanated from them, propelling him forward at an astonishing speed, leaving nothing but a fleeting afterimage in his wake. Ahead, the large black dog began to slow, its movements betraying exhaustion. Its black, fluffy coat and bear-like appearance were unmistakable. It was Sirius Black. Without a second thought, John increased his speed, and with a 10-meter gap closing rapidly, he leaped forward. The force of his jump was so great it left a crater in the ground, reminiscent of a superhero in action. As he flew through the air, a powerful kick aimed directly at the dog's midsection. John thought, first, neutralize the threat. Meanwhile, Sirius Black, unaware of the imminent danger, was focused on evading capture. No one knew the castle's secret passages better than him, and he used this knowledge to navigate towards the Forbidden Forest, where he had established a hideout with the help of new allies. However, his recent indulgence in dog food had left him out of shape, and he found himself tiring quickly. Just as he decided to slow down, a familiar scent caught his attention, but before he could identify it, a forceful kick sent him flying. The impact was so severe that Sirius was sure he had broken bones. He tumbled across the ground, finally coming to a halt against the railing at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Sirius struggled to his feet, coughing up blood and fragments of his spleen, staring in disbelief at John, who had skidded to a stop, leaving deep gouges in the earth. What kind of wizard resorts to physical violence? Where's your wand, your magic? Sirius thought, dazed from the blow. Despite the severe pain, his animagus resilience allowed him to stand, albeit shakily. John, surprised by Sirius's ability to withstand such a kick, prepared for another confrontation. Drawing his wand, he faced Sirius with a cold determination. Sirius Black, reveal yourself or I'll force you to, he demanded. After a moment of silence, under John's unwavering gaze, Sirius transformed. The large black dog morphed into the true form of Sirius Black, revealing a man who, despite his gaunt appearance and pallid skin, bore the unmistakable signs of a powerful wizard. His transformation was so seamless that John could detect the subtle magic at work, a testament to Sirius's skill. The standoff between them was tense, each assessing the other, ready for what would come next in this unexpected encounter. John observed the man before him, who bore a striking, albeit unkempt, resemblance to Snape. Covered in grime and oil, it was evident that personal hygiene, including the use of shampoo, had long been abandoned. Sirius Black, upon noticing John's Slytherin uniform, offered a grim smile, revealing a set of yellowed teeth. The sight was unsettling, and the odor of his breath suggested it had been ages since he last brushed his teeth. John Wick, Sirius addressed him, his voice raspy. He rested a hand on his gaunt left side, coughing up blood, a clear sign of his deteriorating health. Despite his condition, Sirius's demeanor was defiant. John assessed Sirius with a critical eye. "Seems you're in no shape to run now," he remarked dryly. Sirius's smile widened, though it did little to mask his grimace. "You're a formidable wizard, I'll give you that," he conceded, his eyes gleaming with a mix of respect and challenge. "But don't make the mistake of underestimating an adult wizard." With that, Sirius produced a wand and aimed it at John. John's brow furrowed in confusion and suspicion. Where had Sirius acquired the wand, and why did it look eerily familiar? It dawned on him then. Sirius hailed from a family notorious for their thievery. John, however, was not one to be caught off guard. Believing in the advantage of striking first, he acted without hesitation. A burst of white light emanated from his wand, meeting the spell cast by Sirius. The two engaged in a fierce duel on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest, their spells illuminating the darkened woods with flashes of light and energy. The battle was intense, with each wizard demonstrating skill and determination. John, despite his youth, matched Sirius blow for blow, proving that age and experience were not the only factors in a wizard's prowess. As the duel progressed, it became clear that this was not just a test of magical ability, but a clash of wills and ideologies. Chapter 151, The Fuchsia Spell and the Truth Behind the Murder. Sirius Black, a key figure in the battle against the Death Eaters, was undeniably strong. Despite not having wielded a wand for 12 years, the moment he grasped it again, his proficiency returned instantly. His spell, Petrificus Totalis, was cast with the elegance befitting his noble bloodline. If one could overlook his worn attire, Sirius stood as a true nobleman in the heat of battle. John, however, was quick to dodge the attack and counter with a spell of his own. A burst of white light from his wand struck the ground, creating a crater. The exchange between them resembled a duel, yet this was no friendly competition. Utilizing transfiguration, John transformed a nearby fence into a python that swiftly coiled around Sirius's ankles, nearly causing him to stumble. In retaliation, Sirius cast a spell that transformed the ground beneath John's feet into a swamp, attempting to ensnare him. "Incendio," John uttered, igniting flames to dry out the swamp and free himself. He then conjured a wall of fire to encircle Sirius. Unperturbed, Sirius broke free from the confinement and, with a raise of his wand, attempted to counter the flames with a spell of his own. However, the fire only intensified, morphing into a towering tornado. Sirius hastily transfigured the fence into a shield for protection, but the fire tornado eventually dissipated, leaving behind only charred remnants of the shield. Seizing the opportunity, John pursued Sirius through the gap in the fence. As he stepped through, a large black dog lurking in the shadows bit down on his leg with formidable strength. John, enduring the pain, managed to punch the dog, sending it flying. Sirius, reverting to his human form in an instant, aimed his wand at John, ready to strike. John was quicker. "Fuchsia, Leva Corpus," he cast, causing Sirius to be lifted off the ground and suspended from a tree. "Expelliarmus." With a flash of red light, Sirius's wand was disarmed and flew into John's grasp. "You should leave with me," John stated, his wand still pointed at Sirius as he approached. "Your spells are excellent," Sirius remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Thank you for the compliment," John replied, his expression unchanging and his vigilance unwavering. Hanging upside down, Sirius inquired, "Who taught you that spell? Is that important?" John was tempted to silence him, but Sirius persisted. "Of course," Sirius chuckled. "That spell was created by Snape, the slug." "He's a professor at the school, head of Slytherin House," John responded coolly, to which Sirius expressed surprise at Snape's current position. "If you're so familiar with Professor Snape, I wouldn't mind taking you to him," John offered, recalling the murder mentioned by his headmaster. "What's your relationship with Remus Lupin?" Sirius, momentarily taken aback, replied, "Remus? He was an old friend, but that's all in the past." John, looking intently into Sirius's eyes, pressed further. "Professor Snape mentioned a murder. I believe you know something about it." "Murder? Did he really say that?" Sirius quickly realized the incident in question and retorted, "He brought that upon himself, and James had to save him." John, intrigued, encouraged Sirius to elaborate. "It was just a prank. Severus Snape was always a thorn in our side at school. One day, when Remus was... well, I decided to play a prank on Snape. It was dangerous, but nothing happened," Sirius explained reluctantly, his voice trailing off when mentioning Lupin's whereabouts. John, piecing together the information, realized the story involved Lupin and was keen to learn more. In a moment of realization, John said, "A joke? If by joke you mean Lupin transforming into a werewolf during the full moon, then it's far from a mere jest." Sirius's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't anticipated John's awareness of Lupin's secret. However, John didn't allow him any time to dwell on his shock, and with a raise of his wand, urged him to continue. Left with no alternative, Sirius resumed, "Well, on full moon nights, Remus retreats to the Shrieking Shack. Severus Snape, eager to catch us in the act, was misled by me into believing that a simple trick could activate the Homping Willow." He left the rest unsaid, but John could infer the grim outcome. Snape, in his pursuit, would encounter not mischief, but a frenzied werewolf. A lucky escape would leave him cursed, a fate dreaded by all wizards. John's eyes narrowed, his voice laced with disdain. "This joke of yours lacks humor." Sirius, undeterred, smirked. "So you seek vengeance for your headmaster?" He doubted the young wizard's resolve, but John's indifferent reply, "Why not?" was followed by a surge of white light from his wand. Sirius felt a surge of fear. He was in mortal danger. Without hesitation, he transformed into a large dog and fled. The tree targeted by John's crushing curse exploded, its innards scattering. John hadn't anticipated Sirius's swift escape and was about to give chase when Hagrid's booming voice halted him. "Who's there?" Close to Hagrid's hut, the commotion had drawn his attention. Armed with a crossbow, Hagrid approached, and in that moment of distraction, Sirius vanished into the night. He's been waiting for this moment, John thought, as he noticed Aurors accompanied by Dementors approaching. Underestimating the cunning of an Azkaban escapee had been a mistake. Casting a disillusionment charm on himself, John made a beeline for the Forbidden Forest. The aftermath of their confrontation drew the Aurors' attention, prompting John to sneak into Hogwarts via the entrance to Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, located in the forest. As dawn approached, he emerged from the Star Society's secret room, blending back into the school as if nothing had transpired. The previous night's events had left Ron utterly terrified. He and Harry overheard a female Auror briefing Professor McGonagall, while a male Auror and Filch surveyed the area, convinced they had seen Sirius Black. With the Fat Lady reinstated and troll guards patrolling, the castle was on high alert. As Harry and Ron discussed the improbability of Sirius entering through Honeydukes, they stumbled upon John exiting a door. Harry, feeling an inexplicable urge to remain unseen by John, hid with Ron. Puzzled by John's presence, they speculated about his overnight stay and decided to investigate the room he had left. Despite Ron's skepticism, Harry insisted on searching the seemingly empty room, hinting at a discovery yet to be made. As they continued their search, Harry and his friends found nothing. The mystery deepened, leaving Harry to ponder, what secret is John hiding? The possibility of a hidden treasure, or perhaps even a person, crossed his mind. Recalling a previous conversation, Harry remembered asking Ron if Blake was wealthy. Ron's response was unequivocal. Blake was exceedingly rich. This memory brought Harry back to a moment when John's extravagance was on full display, suggesting an almost limitless wealth. The lavishness that John exhibited was unlike anything Harry had seen before. It wasn't just the opulence, but the ease with which John seemed to wield his wealth, as if there was an endless reservoir from which he could draw. This observation made Harry even more curious about the source of John's fortune. Was it inherited, or was there a more mysterious origin? The thought that there could be hidden depths to John's wealth, perhaps even tied to the secret they were currently trying to uncover, intrigued Harry. As they moved through the dimly lit corridors, the silence around them seemed to thicken, adding to the atmosphere of mystery. Harry couldn't shake off the feeling that they were on the brink of discovering something significant. The idea that John might be guarding a secret, possibly linked to his vast wealth, only fueled Harry's determination to uncover the truth. With each step, the anticipation grew. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged looks of determination, their resolve strengthened by the mysteries that lay ahead. They knew that whatever John was hiding, it had the potential to change everything they thought they knew about him. The question that lingered in the air was not just what John was hiding, but why. And as they delved deeper into the unknown, they were ready to face whatever secrets awaited them. Chapter 152, The Upside-Down Dog and the Indestructible Shoes. Ron suddenly found himself in the spotlight, a novel experience that overshadowed even Harry's usual fame. Despite the discomfort of the shock, Ron reveled in the attention, recounting his adventures with animated enthusiasm. "I was asleep when I heard something tearing. At first, I thought it was just a dream," Ron narrated with the flair of an ancient storyteller, captivating his audience of young wizards who listened with bated breath. "Then, a cold breeze woke me, and I saw one side of my curtain had been shredded." In the midst of his tale, a shout interrupted the gathering. "Look, there's a dog standing on its head outside." Instantly, the crowd dispersed, rushing to witness the spectacle. A beagle, looking rather forlorn, balanced upside down in a corner. Its adorable demeanor tempted a few girls to approach, but the stern glares from nearby Slytherin students kept them at bay. The Weasley twins, curiosity piqued, exchanged bewildered glances. "Is that John's dog?" they wondered aloud. John, known throughout the school for his affection for dogs, seemed to be punishing Tom, his pet. This revelation was more shocking to them than if they had been told Filch had found love. Speculation about John's true identity began to swirl, with Malfoy among those suspecting there was more to the story. In a show of loyalty, Malfoy rushed to defend his friend's dog, only to end up nursing a black eye, courtesy of Goyle and Crabbe's clumsiness, which only made Malfoy retaliate with his wand. Daphne, concerned, approached John, who wore a menacing sneer. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing Tom's distress. John's response was cold, revealing the dog had stolen a spare wand intended for Sirius. "Don't plead for it," he warned, his tone unusually harsh. Daphne and Pansy exchanged puzzled looks. "Did you feed him something?" Pansy inquired. "No, I haven't made any strawberry mapo tofu yet," Daphne replied. They were at a loss, unable to understand what had incited John's anger, unaware of the pain he felt from the dog's bite. If not for Crookshank's absence, they mused, a cat might have been standing upside down as well. John, trying to move past the incident, felt a twinge of pain from the bite. That dog is ruthless, he thought, grateful for his resilience. Deciding to let Tom stand on his head until class ended, John's gaze hardened, reminiscent of a past ordeal involving a nest of spiders. His grim expression deterred any further questions. Ron, slightly miffed at being upstaged, wondered if John had discovered their morning's escapade. Harry, however, was certain John remained unaware. After class, John sought treatment for his leg, opting for a costly but effective magical healing that cost him 100 galleons. The spell worked flawlessly, leaving no trace of the injury, though John couldn't help but question the steep price, suspecting goblin magic involved middlemen. With his leg healed, John made his way to the edge of the forbidden forest, his gaze fixed on a particular tree that had caught his attention the day before. John reflected on the battle from the previous night. Sirius had refrained from using offensive spells against him, opting instead for traps and disarming techniques. As he pondered this, he found himself wandering deeper into the forbidden forest. Just before stepping into the dense foliage, he paused, noticing Luna Lovegood's gaze fixed on him. "Luna, what brings you here?" he asked, approaching her. Luna, appearing somewhat distant, replied in her dreamy voice, "I'm searching for the crumple-horned snorkack. Neville Longbottom has been troubled by rackspurts lately, so I ventured out here." John was puzzled. "Rackspurts?" he questioned, scanning the area with his insight, but finding nothing of the sort. "They're invisible. They float into your ears and muddle your thoughts," Luna explained, her voice light and sing-song. "But they're drifting away now." John raised an eyebrow, realizing he had indeed been feeling confused moments earlier. Luna's unexpected presence had snapped him back to reality. He smiled at her, a warmth in his gaze akin to that for a sister, though he had none. Noticing Luna's bare, mud-stained feet, John frowned. "Were your shoes hidden again?" He was aware of Luna's unpopularity within Ravenclaw and the bullying she faced. "My shoes like to play hide-and-seek when I'm asleep," Luna said nonchalantly. John pondered for a moment before offering, "Let me give you a pair of shoes that won't play hide-and-seek." Luna's rare smile appeared. John cleaned her feet with water conjured from his wand, then removed his own shoes and placed them on her feet. With a tap of his wand, the oversized shoes shrank to fit perfectly. "Now these shoes won't hide from you," John assured her, standing barefoot. Luna examined her new shoes, her mood visibly lifted. As they walked, John inquired about the crumple-horned snorkack, and Luna described it in her ethereal voice, adding a touch of magic to the forest air. Upon returning Luna to the Ravenclaw Tower, John noticed the change in demeanor among some Ravenclaw students who had previously mocked her. He met their stares with a silent challenge, causing a few to hastily retreat. Leaving Ravenclaw behind, John sought out Professor Snape in his office. Upon entering, he couldn't help but compare Snape's unkempt appearance to Sirius Black's. Snape, noticing John's muddy feet, greeted him with a cold stare. Breaking the silence, John ventured, "So, Professor Lupin wasn't the only one involved in the incident, was he?" Snape's impatience was palpable. "As I've told you, John Wick, that werewolf is not to be trusted. He was in league with Sirius Black and Harry's father." John, undeterred by Snape's dismissive tone, pressed on. "Then, the victim was you, Professor, wasn't it?" At this, Snape's composure faltered, his face darkening with anger. "You know too much, Mr. Wick. Lupin must have been very forthcoming about those days." Snape struggled to contain his anger, his lips pursed tightly, barely restraining himself from lashing out. "No," John said, shaking his head. He observed Snape's expression, which was on the verge of anger, and stated flatly, "Sirius Black told me." Snape stood up abruptly, his gaze piercing through John. His face trembled with a mix of emotions, and he managed to squeeze out his words through clenched teeth. "You met him? That damned Azkaban fugitive, Sirius Black?" Anger, embarrassment, and a visible intent to kill intermingled on his face. "Tell me, where is that accursed man?" The tension in the room was palpable as Snape's voice echoed, filled with a blend of outrage and disbelief. John remained calm, understanding the gravity of his revelation and the storm of emotions it had unleashed in Snape. Chapter 153, Snape's Past and Cooperation. For the first time, John witnessed Professor Snape lose his composure. In the past, Snape's deductions of house points were seen as mere eccentricities. However, now, Snape was visibly seething, his eyes flickering with a hint of murderous intent. Realizing his lapse, Snape quickly regained his composure, though memories of his youth haunted him. The Gryffindor quartet, particularly James Potter and Sirius Black, had been a constant source of torment from his first day at Hogwarts, leaving scars that never fully healed. John observed the myriad of emotions playing across Snape's face, anger, sadness, and a fleeting desire for vengeance, before they settled into a cold detachment. "Where did you encounter him?" Snape inquired, his voice steady despite his earlier turmoil. "Forbidden Forest," John replied, adding that he had no intention of alerting the Aurors to Sirius Black's presence. Snape's eyes narrowed. "You do realize the danger that man poses?" he asked, his tone laced with sarcasm. He mistakenly thought John fancied himself a hero for attempting to capture Black single-handedly. John chuckled, shaking his head. "Isn't there a professor here?" he retorted, locking eyes with Snape. "Don't you find it suspicious that Sirius Black managed to enter Ron Weasley's bedchamber? He could only have done so with inside help, which puts Harry Potter in danger." Snape, ever astute, considered John's words. "And you believe the victims of his alleged crimes were innocent?" he sneered, his disdain for Black palpable. "He escaped Azkaban with a singular purpose," John pressed on. "But don't you think it's odd? Sirius Black isn't one to make such blatant errors." Despite his initial reluctance, Snape found himself intrigued. "And you assume I'll assist you?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "It's in the school's best interest, and I'm certain you wouldn't refuse to help Harry," John replied confidently. The mention of Harry wiped the smile from Snape's face, and he promptly dismissed John. Yet, John wasn't fooled by Snape's outward coldness. He knew the depth of Snape's affection for Lily Potter, and, by extension, her son. Snape's actions, driven by love and sacrifice, deeply moved John. Though Snape didn't explicitly agree to help, John was certain of his support. Snape's personal vendetta against his old rival would ensure his cooperation. With Snape's assistance, John was confident in their eventual confrontation with Sirius Black. Meanwhile, John's health had begun to decline. His meals consisted solely of water and bread, a stark contrast to his previous appetite. To the uninformed, it appeared as though he was undergoing some form of penance. This drastic change left John visibly emaciated, sparking concern among those who noticed. The ceremony had just concluded when a large flock of owls swooped into the auditorium, breaking the silence. One owl, in particular, made its way to Neville, landing gracefully in front of him. Neville had undergone a remarkable transformation. Gone was the timid boy with a round face. In his place stood a young man with a chiseled jawline and noticeably muscular arms. Without his wand, Neville might have seemed like a mere child, but his physical presence now suggested otherwise. However, the moment he received a red envelope from the owl, his demeanor reverted to that of the old Neville. Despite his swift exit from the auditorium, the roaring contents of the letter echoed through the space, a testament to Mrs. Longbottom's formidable temper, rivaling even that of Molly Weasley. Observing Malfoy's delight at Neville's discomfort, John, with a thoughtful expression, decided to add weight-running events to Malfoy's schedule. Malfoy's face twisted in pain at the announcement. He could have refused, but he chose not to. The exercises John prescribed were challenging, Yet Malfoy found himself begrudgingly enjoying the newfound strength they brought him. The bulletin board announced an upcoming trip to Hogsmeade, sparking excitement among the students. John encountered Filch, who looked utterly defeated, weighed down by sandbags. Filch shared a tale of his recent defeat at the hands of a student, describing only a fleeting glimpse of black hair and a school uniform before his adversary vanished. John struggled to find a gentle way to explain that sometimes self-improvement comes from within, not just from external enhancements. Filch, frustrated by his inability to catch the student who had eluded him, decided to focus on his duties, leaving John to head towards the Forbidden Forest. There, he encountered Professor Snape, who, with his billowing robes and imposing presence, resembled a formidable creature of the night. Snape expressed his hope to resolve their task before darkness fell, and John, sensing the gravity in Snape's tone, simply nodded. Together, they ventured into the forest without further conversation. Meanwhile, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were summoned to Hagrid's cabin. Hagrid, in his usual well-meaning but clumsy manner, attempted to mediate the ongoing conflict among the trio, particularly focusing on the tension between Ron and Hermione over Crookshanks. Despite Hagrid's empathy for Hermione's situation, he underestimated Ron's stubbornness, who demanded that Crookshanks be sent away as a condition for reconciliation. Back in the Forbidden Forest, John and Snape's journey was marked by silence, a reflection of their unfamiliarity and mutual caution. However, John could sense Snape's probing gaze. Discovering a pool of blood, John realized that Sirius Black had been there. Snape, examining the scene, questioned John about the injury, hinting at the possibility of John having wounded Sirius, a known Death Eater, an escapee from Azkaban. Snape, aware of Sirius's capabilities and his history with James Potter, was filled with a mix of curiosity and apprehension about John's potential. As their eyes met, a moment of mutual shock passed between them. John calmly explained that he had restrained himself, avoiding any unforgivable curses or harmful spells. Snape, momentarily caught in his own turbulent thoughts, nodded in acknowledgement, the tension between them easing slightly as they continued their investigation in the forest. John had vanished as if he had never existed. Rising to his feet, John continued his pursuit, following a trail of blood that abruptly ended at a tree hollow. "He's escaped," John concluded, picking up a piece of jerky chicken breast that had fallen into the hollow. It seemed the fugitive had managed to sustain himself on a meager meal of dog food during his overnight flight. However, John was confident the man hadn't escaped the confines of the Forbidden Forest, which would simplify the search. In the days that followed, John and Snape worked together, their efforts seamlessly coordinated as they combed through the dense underbrush of the Forbidden Forest. They stumbled upon several makeshift shelters and signs of recent habitation, but their quarry had always fled just ahead of their arrival. It was becoming increasingly clear why the Aurors had struggled to capture this elusive individual. His ability to evade detection was uncanny. The forest, with its ancient trees and shadowy recesses, seemed to conspire with the fugitive, offering countless hiding spots and escape routes. Yet, John and Snape persisted, driven by a determination that matched the cunning of their target. The Forbidden Forest was vast, but it was finite, and they believed it was only a matter of time before their persistence paid off. As they delved deeper into the forest, the signs of the fugitive's passage became fresher, indicating they were closing in. The game of cat and mouse continued, with the stakes growing ever higher. John and Snape knew that capturing this individual was crucial, not just for the sake of justice, but to unravel the mystery that had led them into the heart of the Forbidden Forest in the first place. Chapter 154, The Silver Wick Swords Upgrade and Strawberry Dumplings. Today marked the visit to Hogsmeade, and Snape, momentarily setting aside his ongoing search, moved briskly through the school corridors. John, observing Snape's hurried pace, deduced he was on the verge of apprehending someone. Casually folding the Marauder's map, John made his way to the secret chamber of the Society of Stars. It had been a week since his last visit, during which Malfoy had borrowed the firebolt, initially stored within the Society's premises, claiming it would serve as a secret weapon. However, John had noticed Malfoy returning to the dormitory with injuries on several occasions, likely the result of falls. Upon entering the society's chamber, John stood before the round table, illuminated by 36 purple stars embedded in the dome above, casting a star map onto the table's surface. With a snap of his fingers, the table split open, revealing a hidden armory beneath. Among the items stored there was a half-completed pair of shoes and various magical artifacts, including the Ring of Spells. The silver Wick sword, prominently displayed on the wall, caught John's attention. He summoned the sword with a gesture, and it flew into his grasp. John then proceeded with a daring experiment, beginning by consuming a prepared soul potion. He termed this process possessing spirits. Once the potion's effects took hold, John retrieved a pure soul stripped from its physical form, and with his right hand enveloped by the silver ring which spread like liquid over his arm, he temporarily alleviated an injury on his hand. Placing the soul on the table, John recited ancient, obscure incantations. The soul, responding to the rhythmic syllables, began to intertwine with the silver Wick sword. The room was suddenly filled with light as the sword absorbed the soul, causing a significant drain on John's magical power. He watched intently as the soul fully integrated into the sword's mithril blade, which then trembled violently, echoing the turmoil within John's own soul. "Return of the soul," John uttered, struggling to contain the rebellious spirit within the sword. The resistance he faced was unlike any he had encountered before, even when pushing the boundaries of magic to their limits. Questioning whether he had touched upon a forbidden resistance, John observed as the silver Wick sword levitated, acting of its own accord without his magical intervention. With his free hand, he drew his wand, and the 36 magic crystals embedded in the dome above concentrated their energy, creating a formidable force that pressed down upon the wand. This force, absorbed by the wand, transformed it into a beacon of purple light, its power so overwhelming that it began to etch thunder-like patterns onto John's arm. John, surrounded by projections of himself casting spells, directed the wand towards the silver Wick sword. A brilliant white beam emerged, inscribing intricate patterns onto the blade. This intense transfer of power, with John serving as the conduit, lasted over 10 minutes. Throughout this ordeal, the sword threatened to spiral out of control, but John managed to maintain dominance with the aid of a gauntlet. As the wand expended its energy, a wisp of black smoke signaled the completion of the process. John's left sleeve was in tatters, but his focus remained unwavering on the transformed silver Wick sword, now pulsating with newfound power and potential. Later that day, amidst the excitement of Hogsmeade, John found himself in a quaint shop, indulging in strawberry dumplings. The contrast between the morning's intense magical endeavors and the simple pleasure of enjoying a sweet treat highlighted the multifaceted nature of life at Hogwarts. On the sword of silver Wick, silver light danced along the blade, igniting it with flames and electric arcs. The blade was etched with mysterious and ancient patterns that, despite their chaotic arrangement, held a unique beauty. Most notably, the magic crystal embedded in the hilt was cracked, yet its miraculous lie remained intact. It was both functional and not. John cautiously reached out, gripping the hilt with his right hand. A tremendous force surged from the sword, but the 6 magic crystals embedded in his glove stabilized it. Despite the sword's initial resistance, it eventually yielded. It was as if the sword of silver Wick had compromised, conveying a sense of confusion and reluctance akin to a child robbed of candy, unable to reclaim it. With a swift motion, John tested the sword on a humanoid target within the secret chamber. Without physically touching it, the target was cleanly bisected, the edges of the cut charred black. "It's effective, but I'm uncertain how long this super magic crystal will last," John mused, returning the sword of silver Wick to its stand. With a simple gesture, the sword flew back into his hand, demonstrating its newfound obedience. The sword, now infused with a soul, had initially resisted but ultimately accepted John's control. This soul, shaped from the combined power of 36 magic crystals, was a testament to John's foray into forbidden magic. Yet in the secrecy of the chamber, his actions remained undiscovered. Magic, to John, was an ideal, and he pursued it with a clear conscience. The chamber, powered by 36 dimmed magic crystals, functioned like a vast alchemical furnace, continuously replenishing its magic power without need for intervention. This self-sustaining mechanism was the cornerstone of the Star Society, inspired by the Room of Requirement. After repairing the damage caused by the magical backlash, which left a mark resembling a Thunderbird tattoo on his left hand, John exited the chamber. He encountered Harry, looking distressed and caught by Professor Snape near the one-eyed witch statue. Despite Harry's protests of innocence regarding a visit to Hogsmeade, Snape was unyielding and escorted him to his office. John observed the scene briefly before moving on. He soon ran into Hermione, who appeared visibly anxious, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "John," she called out, stopping him in his tracks. After a moment's hesitation, she requested a more private place to talk, away from prying eyes. John agreed, and as they moved, he couldn't help but admire the intricate, lightning-like mark on his hand, which, unlike Harry's scar, possessed a strange allure. As they reached the secluded covered bridge, Hermione prepared to share her concerns, marking the beginning of another mysterious chapter in their magical journey. Hermione, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. She gazed at John with a mixture of confusion and hope. "John, where's the password note I gave you?" she inquired expectantly. John paused, his mind racing back to the moment he had battled Sirius. In an attempt to dry the swamp with a flame spell, the paper had inadvertently turned to ashes. With a hint of regret, he admitted, "It's gone. It was burned." Hermione was taken aback by his response, finding it almost unbelievable. After a prolonged silence, she turned and walked away without uttering another word. John, puzzled by her reaction, rubbed his chin in thought. Did she want me to feed her cat? He mused. However, he quickly dismissed the thought, reminding himself of the more pressing task at hand, finding Sirius Black. Time was of the essence, and he couldn't afford to dwell on minor misunderstandings. As John continued on his way, he unexpectedly ran into Daphne near the covered bridge. He was curious about her presence in this particular spot, especially since it offered a clear view of the bridge. Daphne approached him with a triumphant smile, clearly in high spirits. She even went as far as to grab John's sleeve excitedly. "I've mastered pineapple pizza and Chinese strawberry dumplings," she announced with pride. John was taken aback by her culinary choices. Is this really what people come up with? He wondered aloud. Despite his initial amusement, evident from his teasing remark about her 2.5-year cooking endeavor, he couldn't help but question her decision to experiment with fruit in such a manner. "You do realize that both Italy and China might banish you for these creations, right?" he joked, trying to lighten the mood with a playful nudge at her unconventional dishes. The interaction between John and Daphne added a lighter, more humorous tone to their day, momentarily distracting them from the more serious and mysterious events unfolding around them. Chapter 55, Aftermath and Valentine's Day. John had severely underestimated the consequences of meddling with forbidden magic. He had begun to sprout feathers. Yes, feathers. It started with a golden feather on his arm, which he initially mistook for something accidentally stuck to him. After attempting to brush it off to no avail, he tried pulling it out, only to wince in pain as it came free. This confirmed his fears. The transformation was real. Within a day, feathers proliferated across his body. Despite concocting a potion for himself, it proved ineffective. John surmised that the transformation was due to the immense magical power infused into his body through his wand, considering the core of his wand was a thunderbird feather. The thought made him grimace. "Am I turning into a bird?" he muttered, a hint of dismay in his voice. However, this peculiar change wasn't entirely without its perks. He discovered he could control the weather within a small radius. Just moments ago, he had summoned a lightning strike near Malfoy's feet, causing him to leap in surprise. With a lazy lift of his eyelids, John remarked in a flat tone, "You still have 2 laps to go." Malfoy, already on the brink of exhaustion, glanced at Neville, who seemed to leave a blur in his wake, and a stubborn resolve took hold. Gritting his teeth, he dragged his weary legs forward, carrying a stone the size of a human head, as if it threatened to snap his spine at any moment. His heavy footsteps left distinct marks along the edge of the black lake. John observed his hands, noting how they had become thinner, his slender fingers generating sparks as they moved. "It's not all bad, is it?" he pondered aloud, uncertain whether this transformation was a blessing or a curse. This newfound ability felt like undergoing a magical blood ritual for free, albeit with significant drawbacks. John had no desire to fully transform into a thunderbird. Rolling up his sleeves, he saw golden feathers sprouting beneath his clothes. With a blank expression, he considered two potential remedies: undergoing animagus transformation to reconfigure his body with advanced transfiguration, or waiting until the semester's end to cleanse his body with a potent magical blood ritual. Either option required patience. Once the Thunderbird blood pulse was eradicated, he might lose this ability, but John preferred that to bearing a bird's visage. After all, not everyone had the audacity to become a figure without a nose, a jest aimed at Voldemort. Imagine if Voldemort had turned his nose into a Horcrux. I'd never find it, John joked to himself, picturing Voldemort touching his non-existent nose. Valentine's Day arrived, devoid of Lockhart's flamboyant celebrations, sparing everyone from the embarrassment of being accosted by dwarves dressed as Cupid. In the Great Hall, some Slytherins, more acquainted with John, teased him with whistles, recalling the previous year's events. It seemed they all anticipated this day to see John humbled. Malfoy, ever the instigator, stood up and proclaimed, "If anyone wishes to send John a letter, I'll gladly deliver it." His declaration elicited laughter across the hall, while the Weasley twins seemed to be concocting their own jest for the occasion. John took the teasing in stride, amused by the spectacle. Suddenly, a swarm of 1,000 paper cranes flew in, landing neatly before him. Malfoy led the laughter, implying the cranes bore love letters for the Slytherin daredevil. John, playing along, began to unfold the cranes, revealing a letter written in emerald green ink. Recognizing the handwriting, he realized it was from the same person as last year. The previous love letter still lay hidden in his drawer, a secret he hoped his father would never discover. This time, the letter didn't compare his eyes to salamanders or his hair to. John swiftly tucked the letter into his pocket with a practiced ease, just as Malfoy approached, leaving the latter with no choice but to return to his seat, visibly irked. He glanced towards Harry, his eyebrows arc, hing in a taunt. "Potter, didn't your little lover from last year send you any letters?" Harry bristled at the comment, his irritation palpable. The notion was absurd. It had been nothing more than a harmless prank. Hermione, ever the peacemaker, quickly intervened to calm him down. Their friendship, though occasionally strained, always managed to mend itself, much like pieces of plasticine that, when separated, can be kneaded back into a cohesive whole. Ron's eyes were wide with disbelief, as if his shocked expression alone could ward off Malfoy's provocations. The day had been challenging enough, with Snape's unjust criticisms of Harry's father and his threat to destroy the Marauders' map, only for Professor Lupin to intervene at the last moment. The gloom only deepened with the arrival of Hagrid's letter, announcing Buckbeak's unfortunate fate. The news brought Hagrid to tears, a sight that weighed heavily on their hearts. Malfoy's return to the common room, still smarting from a recent encounter with Harry and his invisibility cloak, escalated tensions further. Words were exchanged, and wands were drawn between him and Ron, but Harry, sensing the brewing conflict and the readiness of Malfoy's cronies, Goyle and Crabbe, managed to de-escalate the situation before any spells were cast. Hermione, lost in thought, seemed barely aware of the confrontation. Valentine's Day brought its own set of challenges. John, having received a chocolate laced with a love potion among his many gifts, discarded it with a casual disdain. His expertise in alchemy allowed him to detect the potion immediately, and he warned Goyle against consuming anything of dubious origin. Having lost his sense of taste, John found little joy in chocolates, likening their texture to tasteless wax. He stored the chocolates away, perhaps for a day when his sense of taste might return, and he could appreciate the craftsmanship of the young witches at Hogwarts. Tom's recent punishment had subdued him significantly, prompting John to lament his lack of wisdom. "Foolish pursuits never end well," he remarked, reflecting on the naivety that had led Tom into trouble. John possessed 3 wands, each with a different core, but it was the one with the unicorn hair core that he wielded in his reprimand. Tom, looking dejected, yet somehow still hopeful, received a stern lecture on the value of discernment in companionship. Sirius's encounter with John had been fortunate. In another wizard's hands, the outcome might have been far grimmer. John ignored Tom's sorrowful expression, leaving him under Basil's watchful eye. The snowy owl perched atop a cabinet, ready to enforce discipline should Tom step out of line. Upon entering the lounge, John was immediately confronted by Daphne, who assertively grabbed his sleeve. Her expression was one of pride and possessiveness, a clear challenge to any who might vie for John's attention. This display of dominance caused a stir among the other young witches, but Pansy, in particular, seemed intrigued by the unfolding drama. Her best friend had finally mustered the courage to stand up for herself. She rose to her feet, scanning the room with a defiant gaze that seemed to challenge anyone to dare cross her friend. The source of the commotion? None other than Slytherin's own Daphne Greengrass. John observed the timid group of young witches before his eyes settled on Daphne, whose expression was a mix of pride and defiance. He was taken aback by her audacity. Standing slightly taller than Daphne, he leaned in, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "Have you been experimenting in the kitchen again?" The sensation made Daphne's cheeks flush with a blush she struggled to contain. John couldn't help but smile at her reaction. It was clear she had concocted another unique dish. With a resigned sigh, he said, "I'm open to trying anything, as long as it doesn't involve fruit." His previous encounters with her strawberry-infused savory dishes, like strawberry mapo tofu and strawberry dumplings, had left him wary of her in-airy experiments. Daphne, mistaking his hesitance for enthusiasm, replied brightly, "How did you guess? Today I made Wellington steak with a chocolate twist." John was momentarily speechless. "Do you even listen to yourself?" he asked incredulously. "Steak and chocolate? How could those possibly go together?" Her innovative, albeit unconventional, approach to cooking never ceased to amaze and sometimes alarm him. Chapter 156, The Storm and the Green Dragon. On Valentine's Day, John bravely sampled a piece of Wellington steak covered in chocolate, a culinary experiment that left his entire body numb with disbelief. It was unclear who had inspired Daphne to combine such ingredients. While most aimed for balanced nutrition and palatable flavors, Daphne seemed indifferent to the dish's lack of appeal, disregarding both its aesthetic and nutritional value. The concoction was a caloric nightmare, and only someone with John's compromised sense of taste could manage to stomach it. Heinrich, witnessing this, couldn't help but express his admiration. He too received chocolates, which to his surprise tasted strongly of garlic. Rumor had it that the Weasley twins faced a blockade in the Gryffindor Tower later that day, narrowly avoiding a trip to the school hospital thanks to Professor McGonagall's timely intervention. As days turned into weeks, Sirius Black remained elusive, prompting John to wonder if he had taken refuge in the Forbidden Forest. On March 6th, under a gray sky signaling the end of winter, a somber mood enveloped the castle. The students were visibly affected by the gloomy weather. John, however, found himself outside the castle, gazing upwards, sensing that a significant moment was approaching. With a small bag in hand, he ventured toward the Forbidden Forest, not in search of Sirius Black this time, but to await an impending storm. Influenced by the presence of a thunderbird, John could feel the tension in the dark clouds above, a massive rainstorm brewing with intent. He made his way to the site of the former spider's nest, a barren reminder of the destruction caused by fiendfire a year prior. Standing at the entrance, he awaited the thunder's cue. Glancing at his pocket watch, he counted the minutes until the first raindrop fell, marking the beginning of a torrential downpour. Hogwarts was soon enveloped in a gray veil of water vapor, punctuated by the occasional flash of lightning. On this day, as the old saying goes, everything comes back to life. John hurried to the spot where he had buried the concoction, quickly uncovering a bottle filled with a blood-red potion. His preparation had paid off. Clutching the bottle, he braved the storm, rushing to a predetermined location deep within the forest. Transformation required a secluded and secure area, and despite the Forbidden Forest's reputation for dangerous creatures, it was unlikely anyone would venture here. Upon arrival, John released a mist from his palm, concealing his surroundings. Pointing his wand at his heart, he recited the spell he had memorized, Amato Animo, Animato Animagus. Without hesitation, he drank the potion in one gulp. What followed was an excruciating pain that coursed through his entire body, accompanied by an alien heartbeat echoing in his ears. John doubled over, supporting himself on his knees as he endured the sensation of his bones being split and marrow cleansed. Amidst the chaos, a foreign consciousness attempted to invade his mind, but John fought to suppress it. The transformation began with his hands, as sharp claws emerged from his fingertips. His school uniform morphed into dark green scales, and his eyes took on a reptilian appearance. John's body expanded rapidly, his breaths growing labored under the strain. The fabric of his clothes fused with his skin, and from his back, spines and bat-like wings emerged. His tail, now fully formed, effortlessly swept aside a nearby tree. In the midst of the mist, a pair of brown eyes blinked open. John, now a monstrous creature stretching 50 feet in length, exhaled sharply, a burst of flame escaping his nostrils, a startling revelation even to him. He had transformed into a dragon, its dark green scales shimmering like black jade in the faint light, wings gently stirring the air, clearing the fog before him. This transformation marked him as possibly the largest animagus ever, a majestic and formidable sight to behold. Under the cloak of night, a dragon, black as the void itself and not the native green of England, loomed large and formidable, reminiscent of the fearsome Hungarian horntail. A burning sensation ignited in John's throat, culminating in the release of a massive fireball that scorched the earth below. The rain, falling steadily, evaporated upon contact with the inferno. With eyes as large as lanterns, John's vision extended hundreds of meters, piercing through the darkness. The rain's persistent patter against his scaly hide did little to disturb his dominion over the landscape. The sheer presence of the dragon instilled a primal fear in the surrounding wildlife, compelling them to cower and tremble. After some time, John willed himself back into his human form. His massive stature dwindled, and his scales receded, revealing flesh and cloth. Opening his eyes, he found himself once again human, the rain now a cold reminder of his transformation. Retrieving his fallen wand, he noticed the Thunderbird feather tattoo on his left hand had vanished, a sign that his ability to manipulate the weather remained intact. With a flick of his wand, John summoned a bolt of lightning, striking a nearby tree. The tree ignited momentarily before the relentless rain extinguished the flames. A blessing in disguise, John mused, a slight smile playing on his lips. Using transfiguration, he conjured an umbrella, effectively shielding himself from the rain. Now, only his hair bore the evidence of his recent ordeal. Exiting the forbidden forest, John observed the Quidditch players on the field, their red uniforms stark against the gray sky. They trained relentlessly, undeterred by the rain. As he departed, a black dog, soaked and looking rather pitiful, approached the area, its eyes wide with terror at the sight of the devastation. What kind of monster could instill such fear? Sirius wondered aloud, unaware of the true nature of the beasts that roamed the forbidden forest. The anticipation for the Slytherin-Gryffindor Quidditch match in April was palpable. Both teams trained with a desperation born of rivalry. Gryffindor's practice came to an abrupt halt when Wood was struck by lightning, leaving the team in disarray. Wood's unfortunate accident was met with a mix of concern and humor, with the Weasley twins joking about the team's seemingly cursed luck. Despite the setbacks, Wood's passion for the game remained unshaken, a testament to his dedication. The Slytherin team, with Malfoy at its core, took to the field with a sense of entitlement, their practice sessions guarded zealously by Goyle and Crabbe. Malfoy, the undisputed star, strutted onto the pitch with a firebolt in hand, drawing envious glances. John, indifferent to the spectacle, offered a nonchalant farewell, his mind already on the challenges ahead. The Ministry of Magic faced a crisis of its own with the mysterious disappearance of 3 Dementors. The Aurors were at a loss, their investigations leading nowhere. Amidst the chaos, John returned to Hogwarts with the captured Dementors, their essence used to restore his arm. With the competition looming, Malfoy's obsession with training was evident, though it came at the cost of his academic performance. John, in contrast, excelled in his studies, earning praise and additional points from Professor Flitwick. Hermione's absence from morning classes and her subsequent irritability raised concerns among her friends. John noted her fatigue and frustration, a stark contrast to Daphne's delight. As the days passed, the tension within the castle walls grew, with the upcoming match and Hermione's uncharacteristic behavior casting long shadows over the students' preparations. For the first time, Hermione decided to forgo the divination class entirely, a decision that took John by surprise. It seemed out of character for Hermione, who was usually so committed to her studies. However, Professor Trelawney's harsh critique, claiming Hermione lacked any talent for divination, deeply wounded her. Ironically, this incident seemed to fulfill one of Trelawney's own prophecies about students leaving her class. With Easter approaching in 4 days, John continued to receive his daily dose of the soul potion. By Easter Day, the tremors in his hands had ceased, though his fingers remained slightly stiff. This minor inconvenience was manageable, especially since he had enough of the potion left to ensure a full recovery. John hadn't abandoned the search for Sirius Black, occasionally transforming into his animagus form to scour the area. One such expedition nearly startled the centaurs in the Forbidden Forest and succeeded in keeping Sirius on edge. In the wild, scent is a powerful indicator of territory, and John's presence led Sirius to believe a dragon was marking its domain. Unbeknownst to John, his efforts to locate Sirius had inadvertently caused him multiple scares. Eventually, John ceased the active search, opting instead to monitor the Marauder's map daily. Given that Sirius was also on the move, searching for someone, John reasoned it was more strategic to wait and let Sirius come to him. This shift in strategy marked a new phase in John's approach, blending patience with his keen sense of strategy. The dynamics of the hunt were changing, and John was adapting, ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 157. Firebolts and Firebolts. As April arrived, the more diligent students had already begun their exam preparations. Tom, meanwhile, was contentedly gnawing on a wand-shaped teething stick, a failed creation of John's. Rather than discarding it, John had repurposed it into a chew toy for Tom. Remarkably, despite over a year of relentless biting, the teething stick remained intact. John glanced at the 2-month-old dog before picking up his book to leave. Tom eagerly wagged his tail, ready to follow, but Basil dramatically retracted his wings just as he was about to spread them. As John stepped outside, Daphne approached him, a hint of concern in her voice. "Why haven't you let Tom out lately?" she asked. John had always allowed the dog to roam freely, but now, having kept him confined for 2 months, it was clear John was upset. He lost a wand and must learn to take responsibility for his actions, John explained. They made their way to the auditorium, where upon settling down, Daphne eagerly presented her latest culinary endeavor. "I've been experimenting with Oriental cuisine," she announced, revealing a set of equipment acquired from overseas wizards. "This is called rice rolls, a traditional Chinese breakfast." Daphne was visibly proud of her achievement, confident in her success. John's interest was piqued. After a string of unconventional meals like strawberry pizza, he was curious about the rice rolls, hopeful for a taste of something familiar. Daphne lifted the lid with a flourish, revealing a plate of chocolate-filled rice rolls. John was taken aback. "Daphne, who exactly taught you to cook?" he asked, struggling to hide his disappointment. Daphne, puzzled, assured him the rice rolls were delicious. "I bought the recipe from a wizard named Chen. Is something wrong?" she inquired. John, half-jokingly, expressed a desire to visit this wizard Chen with some special products. Inwardly, he resolved to have Tang Mi deal with the charlatan, humorously thinking of sending a message to old Tang about wanting to eat fish. Daphne, however, admitted she didn't know where Chen lived, thwarting John's plans for retribution. Their conversation was interrupted by Malfoy, who approached with an uneasy look. "John, I heard about Tom and your wand," he said, his discomfort evident. John was surprised by Malfoy's concern for his dog, wondering if Malfoy had grown attached to Tom during their recent walks. John responded coolly, emphasizing the importance of accountability. Malfoy quickly excused himself, leaving John to ponder his odd behavior. Turning to Heinrich, who had been quietly observing, John inquired about Malfoy's sudden departure. Heinrich, distracted, mentioned the upcoming Quidditch final between Slytherin and Gryffindor, explaining Malfoy's preoccupation. John then noticed the Weasley twins looking uneasy under Heinrich's intense gaze. "You're not planning to send someone to the hospital before the game, are you?" John asked, recognizing the violent intent in Heinrich's eyes. Heinrich, unabashed, confirmed his intentions, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous fervor. John, however, reminded him of the consequences, especially considering the twins were Percy's brothers. In the end, it was the honor of the Stars Club that reined in Heinrich's impulses, ensuring Percy remained unaware of the potential conflict. This chapter highlights the complexities of friendship, responsibility, and the thin line between justice and vengeance within the magical world, all while weaving in elements of humor and culinary misadventures. The tension was palpable as the two teams prepared for the match, under the watchful eye of a sunny sky with just a hint of a breeze. In the locker room, strategies were being laid out when John noticed Cedric's troubled expression. "Cho Chang is going to cheer for Gryffindor," he said, his voice tinged with embarrassment. John understood Cedric's concern. After all, Cho had been on the receiving end of Malfoy's aggressive tactics during the Slytherin match, being bumped and dragged multiple times. It was understandable that she wouldn't be eager to support Slytherin now. "We should respect her choice. It's just a game, and it won't impact your friendship," John said, emphasizing friendship with a half-smile. Cedric nodded, though his ears turned red with embarrassment. Moments before the match, Daphne and Pansy approached. Pansy, in particular, was fuming about the Gryffindor commentator, fearing bias could demoralize their team. John, seeing the concern, asked Blaise Zabini to fetch Ernie Macmillan from Hufflepuff. Together, they approached Professor Snape to suggest having a commentator from another house to ensure fairness. Snape, after a moment's consideration, agreed to discuss the matter with Professor McGonagall. As the teams emerged from the locker room, Harry's firebolt was the center of attention, a symbol of his slight vanity, but also his commitment to the game. Ron's boast about the superiority of the firebolt over Malfoy's Nimbus 2001 was cut short when the Slytherin team appeared, with Malfoy brandishing a firebolt of his own. The sight of it silenced Gryffindor supporters. The match was no longer a one-sided affair, but a true competition of equals. The game began with an air of intense rivalry, especially between Harry and Malfoy. Malfoy taunted Harry, hinting at the unfair advantages he believed Harry had received since joining the Quidditch team. Malfoy's resentment was clear. He felt overshadowed despite his own efforts and the support from his father. The match was not just a game, but a battle for recognition and respect, with both sides determined to prove their worth. As broomsticks soared into the air, the focus was on Harry and Malfoy, each on a firebolt, circling each other with competitive fire in their eyes. The match was more than just a game. It was a clash of ambitions, efforts, and the desire to emerge victorious, not just for themselves, but for their houses. The outcome would depend on skill, determination, and perhaps a bit of luck, as both teams vied for the coveted victory. If it weren't for John, Slytherin's 9-game winning streak, a source of immense pride, might have been a thing of the past. In a world without Dumbledore to guide them, Slytherin found its beacon in John. Reflecting on his daily training, Malfoy realized he couldn't afford to slack off, even during the holidays. He took a deep breath, his determination stealing in his gaze. Harry noticed a change in Malfoy, a transformation that had been gradual, yet profound. Malfoy had grown stronger, his flying skills sharper, and his overall performance significantly enhanced. Without much fanfare, Malfoy had evolved. The competition between the two teams was intense, marked by fierce determination on both sides. A particularly dirty play by Slytherin clashed with Weasley's cunning, bringing the teams to the brink of a brawl. Gryffindor's goalkeeper Wood showcased exceptional skills, making it a challenge for even the sleek Nimbus 2001 to score. In a blatant foul, Slytherin's chaser Montague targeted Katie, aiming to prevent her from intercepting the quaffle. Lee Jordan's commentary was filled with excitement, so much so that he seemed to forget the presence of the Slytherin head behind him, unleashing a tirade of biased remarks. Professor McGonagall's expression soured at the display, and Snape intervened with a cold efficiency, pulling Jordan away and seating Ernie Macmillan in his place. Snape's icy glare was a clear warning. Fairness and impartiality were non-negotiable. "If you can't make a fair and just evaluation, then find someone else," he stated sharply. Lee Jordan attempted to return to his post, but was effectively blocked by the imposing figures of Goyle and Crabbe. His slight frame stood no chance against their bulk. Ernie, initially taken aback by the sudden responsibility, quickly adapted. With a penchant for the spotlight and a sharp tongue, he dove into the role of commentator. Being neither a Gryffindor nor a Slytherin, he offered a more balanced perspective on the game. As the match reached its climax, the golden snitch finally made its appearance, capturing the focused attention of both seekers. Chapter 158, A Duel of Kings. In the eyes of Muggles, this would be akin to a showdown between two top-tier sports cars, their engines roaring to life. The moment their gazes locked, Harry and Malfoy, mounted on their brooms high above the Quidditch pitch, resembled two arrows, one red and one green, launched into the fray. Without a moment's hesitation, Harry leaned into his firebolt, propelling it forward with all the speed it could muster. Their singular focus was the golden snitch. The score stood at 30-80 in Slytherin's favor. Despite Wood's near-heroic goalkeeping and the Gryffindor team's rigorous training, Slytherin had emerged as a formidable opponent, reborn and relentless in their pursuit of victory. Derek, a Slytherin beater, took precise aim at a bludger and sent it hurtling towards Harry. Skillfully, Harry maneuvered his broom, dodging the bludger while keeping an eye on Malfoy, who was hot on his trail. The snitch was the key to turning the game around. Capturing it would secure a win for Gryffindor. Wood, in his final year, was passionate about Quidditch, and Harry was determined not to let him leave without lifting the trophy. With this resolve, Harry pushed his firebolt to its limits, weaving through the air with agility that made controlling such speed seem effortless. The snitch led them on a chase through the Gryffindor stands, and Harry executed a sharp pull-up to maintain his blistering pace. "I have to catch it soon," he thought, eyes locked on the elusive golden snitch. Suddenly, he felt a jarring impact. Anger flashed across his face, ready to accuse Malfoy of foul play, but he realized Malfoy hadn't even glanced his way. Malfoy's eyes were fixed solely on the snitch, his hair streaming behind him, unheeded in his single-minded chase. Both riders, pushing their brooms to the brink, left streaks of color in their wake as they dove beneath the stands. The wooden beams became a labyrinth of obstacles, but Harry's innate flying talent shone brightly. He dodged each potential collision with reflexes that bordered on supernatural. Sweat beaded on Malfoy's forehead, too focused to wipe it away, the droplets slowly edging towards his eyes under the force of the wind. The spectators, unable to see the players clearly, could only watch the fabric of the stands flutter violently as the two passed by, a mere half-length apart. Harry felt himself slowing, and his frustration surged, suspecting Malfoy of some trickery. But then the snitch reappeared, gleaming brightly. It wasn't that he was slowing. Malfoy was simply accelerating, pushing the limits on this perilous course. Refusing to be outpaced, Harry accelerated as well. The two of them, rather than slowing, were now speeding through the stands at an even greater velocity. The snitch burst into the open, with only their blurred after-images trailing behind. Marcus Flint, watching from the sidelines, remembered the grueling training sessions. Malfoy had transformed, driven by an insatiable hunger for victory. Even when exhaustion set in and complaints filled the air, Malfoy persevered, taking on the mantle of captain and inspiring his team to push beyond their limits. How can he lose? Flint thought, his eyes blazing with determination. He rarely vocalized his encouragement during games, often resorting to cunning strategies instead. But this time, he bellowed, "We're Slytherins!" His voice ignited a fire within the team. "Noble Slytherin, defend the honor to the death," they roared back, their voices filled with a bravery that shattered the typical image of Slytherin cunning and deceit. Caught off guard, Katie Bell watched as Montague seized the quaffle and scored, the Slytherin stands erupting in cheers. The game had transformed into a testament of skill, determination, and the unyielding spirit of both houses. John witnessed the scene unfold on the Quidditch pitch, his voice resonating with conviction as he spoke. "We were born in the mire, yearning for power, filled with ambition. We are strong, composed, and carry ourselves with grace. Alive without regrets. We are Slytherins." His words echoed across the field, silencing the restless stands. He continued, "We pursue glory, defend it, witness it, and embody it. We are the glory." At that moment, Every Slytherin's eyes blazed with fanaticism, their fists clenched as if they were kings witnessing their own coronation. It started with one voice, but soon every Slytherin joined in a unified chant. Glory, glory, glory. The fervor was palpable, their singular cry of glory, drowning out the noise from the other houses, enveloping the Quidditch pitch in a wave of green pride that transformed into a formidable force. Each Slytherin seemed to draw infinite strength, and the Slytherin team's performance intensified. The scoreboard's numbers began to climb rapidly, causing Wood to grow anxious, his attention torn away from Harry's plight. The chant of glory invigorated the Slytherin team, their determination unwavering even in the face of physical pain. Warrington, despite being struck in the nose by a bludger, remained silent, his focus unbroken. They were like zealots, with glory as their creed. Malfoy, in pursuit of the snitch, was reminded of his rigorous training. What was it all for? Glory. With renewed purpose, he accelerated, the golden snitch diving towards the ground. Malfoy followed without hesitation, Harry at his side, both plummeting towards the earth. The crowd held its breath, Hermione and Ron standing, eyes fixed on the scene, Ron muttering a prayer for Harry's success. Unlike before, Malfoy was determined not to give up. "Come here," he roared, both he and Harry reaching for the snitch simultaneously. They crashed to the ground, rolling to a stop in a V shape. The crowd rose to its feet in anticipation, Ron and Hermione anxious for the outcome. Harry, recovering from the fall, clenched his fist and then, with a smile, triumphantly raised his hand, revealing the snitch. "I caught it!" Gryffindor's cheers filled the air, only to be silenced by the announcement of Slytherin's victory, the score revealing a 10-point difference, a result of Montague's sacrifice. The Gryffindor stands were stunned, their joy turning to disbelief. Snape's smile contrasted with McGonagall's shock. The dramatic turn of events was unexpected. Harry had caught the snitch, yet Gryffindor had lost. Malfoy, sitting on the ground, locked eyes with Harry, his expression complex. "You beat me, but you can't beat Slytherin," he conceded, acknowledging the bittersweet nature of personal victory versus team success. In the Slytherin stands, the cheers were overwhelming, the team celebrating their hard-fought victory, especially Montague, despite his injury. Malfoy, initially desolate, found himself at the center of his team's jubilation, his earlier despair replaced by a sense of collective achievement. "Yeah, we won," he admitted, a smile spreading across his face as he was lifted by his teammates, their camaraderie and shared glory evident in their celebration. The corners of his mouth twitched upwards uncontrollably, eventually erupting into a wild, unrestrained laugh. The King of Gryffindor may be Harry Potter, but Slytherin reigns supreme over all four houses. The would-be king has failed to claim his throne, yet Slytherin has safeguarded its glory. We are the embodiment of glory. All hail Slytherin! During the award ceremony, presided over by Dumbledore, Slytherin was celebrating its 8th consecutive victory. However, this time, Dumbledore's eyes held a hint of complexity as he observed the scene. His gaze lingered on a young boy who stood up, cheering along with his housemates. This boy had transformed Slytherin from a mere house of ambition into a formidable force, as enduring and magnificent as green glass. He was destined to be the king of Slytherin. His name was John Wick. Dumbledore's expression was thoughtful as he watched John Wick, recognizing the profound impact he had on Slytherin. It was clear that under Wick's influence, Slytherin had not only defended its honor but had also begun to redefine it. The boy's leadership and prowess had united his house, turning them into a cohesive and powerful entity that commanded respect across Hogwarts. As the cheers for Slytherin's victory filled the Great Hall, it was evident that a new era was dawning. An era where Slytherin, under John Wick's guidance, would not only be known for its ambition, but also for its strength, unity, and undeniable glory. Dumbledore knew then that John Wick was not just a fleeting phenomenon, but a pivotal figure who would leave an indelible mark on the history of Hogwarts. Chapter 159, The Dog Squad and Snape's Revenge. Slytherin's cheers echoed throughout the stadium, spreading from the pitch to the auditorium and then to the lounge. Hogwarts was awash in a sea of green, and the word glory was on everyone's lips once again. This marked Slytherin's 8th championship victory, a title they had held for 7 consecutive years, with the exception of the second year when the Quidditch tournament was unexpectedly cancelled. Their joy at reclaiming the championship was palpable. Malfoy was at the center of it all, the badge on his chest shining like a beacon. "John, did you see that? We are the champions," he exclaimed, trophy in hand, his eyes scanning the crowd for John. Daphne approached him, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "John left earlier. He wanted me to tell you that you shine as brightly as a star now." She had hoped to share this moment of triumph with John, to take his hand in hers, but he had abruptly left after glancing at a piece of paper. Despite John's absence, the celebration continued unabated. Malfoy was lauded for his relentless pursuit of the Golden Snitch, a strategy that kept Harry Potter on his toes and filled the Slytherin team with a fighting spirit. Malfoy and Montague were hoisted into the air as heroes, their surprise and joy evident. Meanwhile, John had left the field early, choosing not to partake in the festivities. Consulting the Marauders map, he noticed Crookshanks on the move and deduced his next course of action. The Forbidden Forest. Keeping Crookshanks was indeed the right choice, he mused, recognizing the opportunity to connect with Sirius Black. After scribbling a message on his badge, John cast a disillusionment charm on himself and headed towards the forest. He maintained a cautious distance, aware of Sirius's keen senses. Even under the guise of the charm, John knew he could be detected. To avoid alarming Sirius, he stayed 200 meters away from the forest's edge. Through the dim light, John's eyes, now resembling those of a cat, spotted Crookshanks approaching the shadowy depths of the Forbidden Forest. A dark figure rose to meet the cat, vigilant and constantly scanning its surroundings. "Sirius Black," John whispered to himself, observing the interaction between the dog and the cat. Sirius appeared gaunt, his fur matted and unkempt, a stark contrast to their last encounter. "It's a shame I can't understand their conversation," John thought, lamenting his limited ability in mind magic, which required closer proximity to be effective. After a brief exchange, Crookshanks ran back, seemingly bearing a message. John seized the moment to follow Sirius discreetly, marveling at the man's cunning for choosing the forest's edge as his hideout, a place most would overlook. Sirius skillfully climbed a tree, finding refuge in its dense foliage. John admired his ingenuity, recognizing the traits of a man who had escaped Azkaban. As time ticked by, John prepared to make his move. He wrote another message on his badge and approached Sirius's hiding spot. Knowing Sirius's reliance on his keen sense of smell, John decided to neutralize this advantage. He exhaled a mist from his palm, blending it seamlessly with the forest's natural fog. Sirius, unsuspecting, was taken by surprise when a dark orb rolled to the base of his tree and exploded with a loud bang. John's actions were calculated and precise, a testament to his strategic thinking. As the mist enveloped the area, the stage was set for an encounter that would unfold under the cover of confusion and shadows. A suffocating stench filled the air, overwhelming Sirius to the point where tears and snot streamed down his face. His normally keen sense of smell was now assaulted by an unbearable odor of feces. Realizing the danger, Sirius attempted to flee. However, a dense fog obscured his vision, making it nearly impossible to see even 2 meters ahead. He suspected it was some form of magic at work. Damn it, when did this happen? In a desperate bid to escape, Sirius transformed into a black dog, hoping his 4-legged form would offer him better speed through the fog. But his escape was not to be so easy. After narrowly avoiding a tree that loomed out of the fog, Sirius felt a massive force strike his waist. The impact reminded him of a familiar foe. Once he managed to clear the fog, he looked up to see none other than a Slytherin student, John, standing before him. John was relentless. Despite Sirius's attempts to dodge, the pain in his waist slowed him down significantly. Gritting his teeth, Sirius shifted back into his human form and, with his wand, cast a sleeping spell towards John, while simultaneously trying to defend himself. John, however, seemed unfazed and launched a series of curses, an iron armor curse, a sleeping curse, and a disarming curse. The air crackled with the energy of their duel, a mix of suppressed excitement and hatred. "Avada, disarm you! Expelliarmus!" John's voice abruptly changed from the lethal killing curse to a disarming spell. The red light of the spell exploded against Sirius's back like a fireball, not just disarming him, but also sending him flying into a tree, where he collapsed, bleeding from a head wound. John turned to see Snape, his wand still raised calmly. If John hadn't heard the start of the killing curse, he might have believed it was merely a slip of the tongue by the professor. "Look who we have here." Snape sneered at the unconscious Sirius, launching into a tirade of insults that were left unsaid for brevity's sake. He then sinisterly suggested, "Give me a reason to end this now." John, observing Snape's interaction with Sirius, interjected, "He's already passed out." Snape's expression momentarily showed surprise, not expecting Sirius to be incapacitated so easily. John hinted, "Your disarming spell seemed a bit more potent than usual." Snape, unfazed, admitted to his intentions. Given Sirius's actions, he felt a strong urge to punish him severely. John, with his own agenda, suggested, "Professor, we shouldn't let him go just yet." He knew Sirius was crucial for acting minister Rufus Scrimgeour's political stability. Scrimgeour had been unstable lately, and John saw an opportunity to leverage Sirius's situation. Snape, realizing he wouldn't be the one to finish Sirius, especially not in front of John, asked, "And who will you hand him over to?" John, with a light smile, replied, "Let's return him to where he belongs." After a moment of scrutiny, Snape used a spell to levitate the unconscious Sirius, and together they transported him to a secluded spot in the Forbidden Forest, known as the Spider's Nest. This location, outside the range of the Marauder's map, was perfect for hiding Sirius away from prying eyes. John retrieved his wand, deliberately ignoring the half-amused glint in Snape's eyes. With a flick and a whisper, he conjured a prison using the Transfiguration charm, showcasing the convenience of magic. Sirius was enclosed within, isolated from any contact with the outside world. To further secure the prison, John employed surveillance spells around the perimeter. These spells were designed to alert him if anyone attempted to tamper with the door or break Sirius out. Once everything was in place, John summoned a stream of water as clear as spring, directing it towards Sirius to rouse him from unconsciousness. The water splashed gently against Sirius's face, stirring him awake within the magically fortified prison. Chapter 160. Truth Unveiled. In the wizarding world, which often seems to linger in the customs of the last century, there are moments of undeniable convenience. For instance, Sirius Black, who had just been rudely awakened by a splash of cold water, found himself in a bewildering situation. His sense of smell had been obliterated by an unfortunate encounter with a dung bomb, courtesy of John, leaving him oblivious to Severus Snape's stealthy approach until it was too late. The voice that roused him was vaguely familiar, yet before he could piece it together, he was coerced into drinking a mysterious potion. "Come on, Dalang, drink this," a voice murmured, as Sirius, still disoriented, complied without question, only realizing what had transpired after the liquid had been swallowed. He looked up to find John holding a glass, his demeanor eerily reminiscent of a caregiver tending to a patient. The sight of Snape's pallid, grim face prompted Sirius to blurt out, "Snotling?" only to see Snape's expression darken further. "What did you just make me drink?" Sirius demanded, a surge of anger cutting through his confusion. "Veritaserum. Didn't I mention it was medicine?" John replied, feigning innocence. A chill ran down Sirius's spine as he realized the precariousness of his situation, that trapped between two of his most formidable adversaries from his school days. It felt akin to being cast back into the horrors of Azkaban. John, observing the serum's effect, conjured a chair and seated himself with a satisfied smile. "It's fascinating, isn't it, Sirius Black? We've met before. You were responsible for that fog, weren't you?" he prodded, unable to resist the allure of uncovering more secrets, especially those concerning Voldemort. Given his and Voldemort's intertwined fates and the destruction of two Horcruxes, John was particularly eager to delve deeper. Sirius, whose mental state had been frayed by 12 years in Azkaban, fixed John with a serious gaze. "I'm not the murderer. It was him, the one who hid," he exclaimed, his voice tinged with madness. John, reacting instinctively, slapped Sirius, the force of the blow swelling his face. "It's him, the coward who betrayed James," Sirius muttered, more lucid now. John turned to Snape, puzzled by Sirius's claim and wondering if his actions had inadvertently caused further confusion. Snape, observing Sirius's condition with a barely concealed eagerness, prompted, "So you're saying you're not the murderer? Then who is?" "I wanted to ask about Voldemort." John thought, but he decided to follow Sirius's narrative. "Peter Pettigrew," Sirius declared, his eyes bloodshot, his demeanor bordering on hysteria. Snape scoffed. "Peter Pettigrew? You seem to forget that you killed him 12 years ago." John, hearing Pettigrew's name, couldn't help but think of Ron's pet rat. Snape, sensing an opportunity, pressed on. "Tell us, who aided your escape from Azkaban and entry into Hogwarts? Was it Remus Lupin?" Sirius, despite his loathing for answering Snape, was compelled by the Veritas. "Not Lupin. I had only 2 friends in this," he admitted grudgingly. "Crookshanks," he revealed, the name hanging in the air, laden with implications yet to be fully understood. "Tom, they are my friends. Help me catch Peter Pettigrew," John implored, his voice tinged with a mix of hope and desperation. Upon hearing the name Tom, a wave of disappointment washed over him. He absent-mindedly twirled his cherry-wood wand between his fingers, his tone light yet laced with an underlying chill. Was this wand a gift from Tom as well? The thought that his loyal dog might have betrayed him by stealing his wand for someone else sent a shiver down his spine. Given Tom's ability to understand human speech and the significance of a wand to a wizard, this act of betrayal seemed even more profound. Sirius, who was standing nearby, quickly corrected him. "No, it wasn't," he clarified. "I found this wand near the Humping Willow." John's confusion deepened. "What?" he exclaimed, his gaze piercing Sirius as he pressed for more information. "Then who gave it to you?" The idea of his wand mysteriously making its way to someone else was baffling. Despite John's repeated inquiries, the answer remained the same. The wand was discovered near the Humping Willow. Frustration evident on his face, John turned to Professor Snape and suggested, "Professor, perhaps the Veritaserum is no longer effective. Should we administer more?" At this, Snape revealed a sinister smile, seized Sirius, and forcibly administered a dose of Veritaserum. Sirius struggled in vain against Snape's grip. The potion's efficacy was undeniable. Sirius inadvertently revealed trivial secrets from his past, including the age at which he last wet the bed. However, amidst these revelations, a significant truth emerged. Sirius was not responsible for the betrayal and murder of the Potter family. The Potters had used the Fidelius charm, entrusting their safety to a secret keeper. James Potter had initially chosen Sirius for this role, but Sirius, fearing he was an obvious target, suggested Peter Pettigrew instead, a decision that would haunt him for years. "We trusted him so much, and we never even considered Remus," Sirius lamented, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and regret. For 12 years, he had lived with the guilt of his perceived betrayal, a guilt that was only compounded when Peter Pettigrew faked his own death, leaving Sirius to be wrongfully imprisoned in Azkaban. It wasn't until Sirius saw a newspaper article about Pettigrew's supposed heroism that he managed to escape Azkaban, determined to clear his name and seek justice at Hogwarts. Snape and John listened in silence, the weight of Sirius's words hanging heavily in the air. If Sirius's account was true, and there was no reason to doubt it given the Veritaserum's effect, this revelation would cast a dark shadow over the Ministry of Magic. "Professor, what do you plan to do with him?" John broke the silence, his question directed at Snape, who seemed momentarily taken aback by the inquiry. John's smile was disarming, yet his suggestion was chilling. "We could simply claim he attacked a student. No one would question his immediate execution or his being handed over to the Dementors." The suggestion sent a shiver down the spines of both adult wizards. Snape, astonished by John's ruthlessness, and Sirius, terrified by the young Slytherin's indifference to justice and life. Snape, regaining his composure, sternly addressed John. "John Wick," he began, his tone a mix of reprimand and disbelief. John, unfazed, suggested keeping Sirius locked up temporarily while they verified the truth. His intention was not to act on his earlier, cold suggestion, but to use Sirius as leverage in negotiations with the Ministry of Magic, especially now that the true story of the events 12 years ago had come to light. Peter Pettigrew, the real traitor, had been celebrated as a hero, receiving the Merlin First-Class Medal for a sacrifice he never made. The irony of the situation was not lost on John, who saw an opportunity to right a grave wrong and bring the true villain to justice. John found himself in a quagmire, with the weight of his next decision resting solely on his shoulders. If Rufus Scrimgeour persisted in his obstinate stance, John was fully prepared to expose the Ministry of Magic's scandals to the public. He envisioned headlines that would shock the wizarding world, painting the Death Eaters in a heroically tragic light. However, if Scrimgeour chose to align himself as an ally to Johnny Silverhand, John was willing to conceal the truth, thereby granting the Ministry a significant favor and preserving its esteemed reputation. Yet, with Professor Snape's presence, John had to tread carefully. After their encounter in the Forbidden Forest, John and Snape made their way out, walking side by side in an uneasy alliance. Snape, with his usual brisk pace, soon parted ways, leaving John to contemplate his next move alone. Regardless of the path he chose, locating Peter Pettigrew was imperative. John's gaze deepened as he absent-mindedly rubbed the ring on his finger, feeling the weight of its dark curse. The ring, with its pitch-black gemstone, seemed to contain swirling, shadowy waters, hinting at the depth of its malevolent power.